allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item of business, reports of city officers. I have comments on 3 items. The first, we were all shocked and saddened by the loss of 2 young lives January 3rd in Lake Forest under violent circumstances, the roots of which go back in time to their home state of Kentucky, where Ryan Zeich and Claire Van Landingham met. Claire was a naval officer stationed at the Lovell Federal Health Care Center at Great Lakes, making her way in life. Sincere and heartfelt sympathies are extended to the families of both these young people. I would also like to thank and commend the prompt and capable actions of the Lake Forest Police Department and the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force in their handling of this matter. A matter which was a domestic matter between 2 individuals that knew each other and evidences no systemic connection to the Lake Forest community. May God rest their souls. Second, I have included in the council packet for city council review at a future date a set of decision-making parameters for city council and appointed boards and commissions that all arises from a meeting 2 or 3 meetings ago where we had a discussion on decision-making, and thereafter a decision-making document outlining parameters was surfaced that was created back in 1994 as part of the city's strategic plan. Alderman Beidler and I agreed to take a look at these parameters and make suggestions, if any, and we have. We've put some updated thoughts and some edits in there, and here it is for the council's consideration. But it's transmitted this evening, is the intention for your thoughts and consideration and suggestions, and we'll bring this back at a forthcoming council meeting. So no action required tonight.
Do you want input tonight on this? No?
No.
Is that the most recent one?
Yeah, it says down at the,
That's not the most recent.
there was a typo, and there's, we'll get you the update.
Yeah,
There was a typo, and then it got,
Sent around.
oh, okay. We'll get you that in the morning. And third, as mayor, I have issued a mayor's proclamation to declare January 23rd, 2018 as the City of Lake Forest Poverty Awareness Day, pursuant to a rather major event that's to take place on Tuesday, January 23rd in the morning at the new Northwestern Lake Forest Hospital, where the Lake County Community Foundation is welcoming nationally renowned researcher and University of Washington Public Affairs professor and Brookings Institution fellow, Dr. Scott Allard, to discuss his 2017 book entitled Places in Need, The Changing Geography of Poverty. For a decade, Dr. Allard has researched and written extensively about the suburbanization of poverty, focusing on Lake County, Illinois, as a national case study. A panel of local leaders will discuss issues at the intersection of poverty and place. And I would add that Lake Forest is not immune to the many forms of poverty that exist in America, and the details are at the Lake County Community Foundation website. Thank you. Next, comments by the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Before I get to the published agenda, I would like to ask our police chief, Carl Waldorf, to please come forward and to give us a brief report on some recent burglaries that have occurred within the community. Carl?
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Mr. Kiley asked me to discuss an arrest our officers made over the weekend in a residential burglary that occurred on Quail, which is in the Pond subdivision in the southeast corner of town. Many of you are aware, just to set the stage for the folks in attendance, that we suffer approximately 18 residential burglaries a year, or about 1.5 a month. Unfortunately, they don't come in a nice orderly fashion like that, of 1 or 2 a month. They often go in leaps and bounds. And we ended December and began January with a total of about 10 burglaries over those 2 months. So our officers were very well motivated to get out and find the people responsible for this. On Sunday evening at about 6 o'clock, one of our officers, Robert Monahan, located a gentleman sitting in a car on Quail. He got out to speak to this gentleman, and while he was speaking to him, the resident came out who had just come home and informed him that their home had been burgled. So the officer was able to detain and eventually arrest this gentleman, who had a wide array of stolen property from burglaries that we've linked throughout Lake and Cook County so far, with more work to do. So that was a good development for us over the weekend, and Mr. Kiley thought we would share it with you. If you have any questions, I can certainly answer.
Carl, I was just going to ask, can you
Good.
talk about the issue of social media? Because I know there was a lot of conversation of, when this happened, should we have sent out an alert, let everybody in the neighborhood know that this was happening? Can you talk to it from a police perspective, please?
Sure. So one of the things we do with all these burglaries, because we suffer a certain amount, is we tend to look for patterns. And so all of our detectives interview victims. They have a long packet that they go through to try and find similarities between these burglaries. Now, there are many cases in which we're unable to link any of the burglaries in a given time period. In this particular case, the detectives noticed two things. We were having a disproportionate amount of burglaries through forced entry. The vast majority of our residential burglaries traditionally are to unlocked homes. And in this particular case, unlocked homes? And in this particular case, we were getting a lot more doors and windows forced. And the second thing they noticed was that while the burglaries were spread throughout town over the last 2 months, about half occurred on the southeast corner of town. So we were spending quite a bit of time in that part of town. Now, one of the things we always struggle with is when to release information and when not. When we have a specific pattern that we think residents can help us with, we often distribute that through social media. For example, our post about the arrest over the weekend garnered, at least as of a few hours ago, about 6,000 views. So we know that we're able to get our best bang for the buck over social media. And if you're not on social media, I'd encourage you to sign up for Facebook, if for nothing other, to just follow us. You don't have to do any of that other stuff if you don't want to. But it is by far our best way to push information out. It's far more effective and far wider read than almost every other method of communication we have. And it's also very timely. So,
Thank you.
question?
Adding to social media, is your own Facebook page for the police department the only one that you would post to? Or I think you monitor the LFLB services and some of the other things,
Right.
so there's a lot of questions out there.
Right.
Also, what about our Code Red capability? A lot of people are asking questions about.
So many of you are aware that we subscribe to a community emergency notification system called Code Red, and if you haven't signed up for it, you can always go to our website to sign up for that. You're able to put in your cell phone or your email address and decide how you'd like to be notified. When we decide to use the Code Red, that's a little deeper decision than just to push something out on social media. And the reason is, when we send a Code Red notification out, we have to be able to deal with the inevitable flood of calls back to 911. And so the decision we make on when to use or not use Code Red is really, is someone at risk in the community right now, and we can give them some information or tools they can use right now to protect themselves. And B, can we afford right now to have a certain percentage of our dispatching capability knocked offline, handling 911 calls from people who are just curious about the Code Red itself. So that's really the logic on when we use or don't use Code Red. So we tend to use it in situations where someone may be in danger. And the best example is when we have the massive flooding that seems to hit town once or twice a year, we'll often send a Code Red asking people to stay at home at the height of the flood so that we don't get more cars or people trapped in flooded areas.
So I guess what I'm hearing is, in the context of these recent burglaries, you think the most cost-effective approach is through social media?
Correct.
Okay.
Wasn't there an alert put out, though, recently in that southeast area over some burglaries that were happening? Seems to me I saw one.
Right. So, and this goes a little bit back to your point, Mr. Kelly. We also follow a lot of the other discussion groups on social media, and people will routinely ask us to make comments on those groups, and so there is a lot of information that comes out from third party, too.
Other questions for the chief? Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
As the council knows, at the start of the calendar year, staff presents what we call our community goals and our priority goals for the upcoming year. This doesn't include everything. We've got hundreds, if not thousands, of other projects that we work on through the course of the year, but we wanted to sort of touch on a couple of things and bring them to your attention, and then see if you have any questions with respect to that. For the 2018 community goals, I start with spirit of community, because staff has discussed this, what I'll call quiet transformation that's going on within the community. When I started here 27 years ago, about a third of the population would turn over every 5 years. That obviously slowed down in the late 90s and early 2000s, but we're starting to see, and you're starting to see through the real estate sales, some of that activity picking up. I think in the last 2 fiscal years, 9% of our housing stock was sold and turned over. When you look at the Kelmscott project and the McKinley Road project and some other residential projects going on, I think we're going to see a continued acceleration of that, subject to what the new tax law changes might be. I've heard people say it's going to be a positive thing. I've heard people say it's going to be a negative thing. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I'd love to give all the credit to the Welcome Home campaign for accelerating this transformation that's going on. But clearly, you can see it in the numbers, and I think it's going to be interesting in 2020 to see the census in terms of what the demographics look like in our community now and going forward. But we're hoping to continue to not only celebrate our community through the Welcome Home campaign, but I think we will also try and do a better job of celebrating the successes, if you will, in the community. Things like what happened at the last meeting with a very generous donation to the Deer Path Golf Course, and many other things that are going on in the community that most people just aren't aware of, and I think we need to be out there and promote those things. Later this evening, or shortly, we're going to talk about some very positive things that have taken place at Deer Path Golf Course, both in 17 and what's planned for 18. And then Sally Swarthout is going to be here to talk about some activities that I think Alderman Tack would say are long overdue at the beach in terms of utilization of the beach and activities down at the beach, as well as a program that they're going to roll out called Go Lake Forest, which is an attempt to try and get people more active in their day-to-day lives within the community. The second bullet up there, clarity of expectations, is a continuation of something we started about last year, and I think if anything in 2017, it just showed us how much work we have to go in this area. You know, we all want smaller government, we all want lower taxes until it comes a time that I want a service. And I think we've seen some of that conflict. I know the Public Works Committee saw that in their public meeting with respect to storm sewer projects and so forth. And so it's this balance that's a very difficult balance between the provision of services that we want, but then how much are we willing to pay for those, and being able to connect the dots between the two. Over the holidays, I was at a party and had a conversation with a resident, and I don't remember if it was sidewalks or streetlights or something, but they said, I want this and I want this. And as we continued the conversation and I asked them questions about, well, how do we equitably distribute that throughout the community, and what should be the policy and so forth. He got a big grin on his face and said, and oh, by the way, I want my taxes lowered too. Because what happened was the connection was made that what he was asking for was going to be a major expenditure of dollars, but he hadn't sort of put it in the context of what it then meant in terms of his property taxes. And I think, those are the kinds of things that we have to continue to educate the community and the residents about, because it's very easy to say yes. It's more challenging to say no, but I think that's one of the reasons why, and the council has done this historically over time, but it's one of the reasons that we have one of the lowest tax bills in anywhere in Lake County. And so I think that's going to continue to be a challenge, and I would say, and I'll talk about it in the final bullet, is it's going to continue to be a challenge as we go forward with what's going on in the state of Illinois. Deliberate mindfulness is also an issue that we first talked about in 2017. I think it continues in 2018 because we're seeing, particularly with social media and other things, that there is a quick rush to judgment and also a quick rush to you're either with me or you're against me kind of an attitude, without really sort of having a civil debate and discussion about the pros and cons of issues. I think before you is a document that was endorsed by the city council and the school districts and so forth a number of years ago, actually written by then primarily Gene Hotchkiss when he was president of Lake Forest College. And I think that it applies as much today as it did back then when it was endorsed by the council, in terms of how we interact with people, how we debate the issues in a very civil way going forward. One of the things that makes it challenging, and I don't think the chief really wanted to talk about this, is that, social media can be a wonderful tool. It also can be a major distraction, because as soon as that very unfortunate shooting occurred on that day, immediately, social media was, we got to lock everything down, there's a shooter on the loose, all these kinds of things that were just false. But it requires staff time to be able to respond to those and tamp down the fears that those quick responses make, and quite frankly, in the end, doesn't really help anybody. Financial acumen, as I've said to the council in the past, I think this will always be on our goals, because things are not going to get any better. We talked about this throughout 2017 and 16 and 15, when we look at the state budget situation. The state did not fix their budget crisis. We all know that. They put a quick Band-Aid on it by raising taxes, but unfortunately they didn't address the underlying problem, which is expenses are going up much faster than revenue sources. So I think we're going to see more activity in terms of taking revenues from local communities, and I think we're going to see less money available through grants and other opportunities there. And so this is just going to be a continuing challenge that this council and future councils are going to have, as going back to the clarity of expectations, is to really balance that. The council knows that in this process, part of the reason that we developed the core and elective process is that the time is rapidly approaching when we're going to have the difficult conversation about what services do we discontinue in the city. Or if not, then we're going to have to increase revenue sources in some way, shape, or form. That's not going to be a pleasant conversation, because somebody is using those services right now, and what we're going to have to do is balance the value of one service against another, deciding which we keep and which we can no longer afford. The priority goals, again, many of these are similar to 2017, the community campaign. Kudos to the committee. I think they had a very successful first year, and we move into year two, but we can't stop there. I know they've got a number of ideas to roll out in terms of additional print media, additional social media opportunities, and I think the best example of their success is the number of copycats that are out there. It wasn't that long after we started to roll out the Welcome Home campaign that some other North Shore communities jumped on the bandwagon and did the same thing. And I see that the state of Wisconsin is going to undertake the same thing, but unfortunately, Alderman Beidler, with considerably more resources than you were provided in doing your chore, but something, that's right, something that we need to move forward with. Fire service, as the council knows, we have submitted a proposal to the Knollwood, or to the Rockland Fire Protection District. We're in conversations with the village of Lake Bluff to take a look at how we might be able to work together to create a fire service that is sustainable financially and that meets the needs of our residents in a more efficient way than we've been able to do in the past. We recognize that whether it's either operating cost or pension costs, that this is a very valuable, important service, but it's also a very costly service. And so with the leadership of Mayor Lansing and Alderman Tack, we'll be having those conversations with these communities through the course of 2018 to see if there's a way that we can come together, work together, and provide a high level of service. On the commuter rail service, hopefully with the assistance of the Preservation Foundation, we will complete the interior renovations of the downtown train station. I think all the work that's been done with the UP North line in downtown Lake Forest, it's beautiful, and we look forward to finishing the interior renovations that are there. Secondarily, at the November of this past year, we received a letter from Amtrak saying that they would make the Amtrak stop at the Milwaukee North Telegraph Road Station, subject to the underpass. And so in 2018, we will be completing the engineering on the underpass and working diligently to try and secure the funding to make that happen. Deer Path Golf Course, and the general manager is going to speak to this in much more detail momentarily, but I think this is a real success story from where it was about 5 years ago to where it is today. The city council had the debate as to whether we were going to shut the golf course down, whether this was a service in light of some of the other financial challenges that we had that we wanted to continue to operate, or did we want to close it down. And the decision was we felt that a community like Lake Forest needed to have a public golf course. I think it was a good decision to make, and we've seen an outpouring of assistance and support for the course, and the improvements that we made, the continuous cart path improvements, the patio improvements, the drainage improvements that were completed in 17. We've got a number of improvements that are scheduled for 18 as well. I will say that much of the work is either going to start before the golf season or at the end of the golf season, because we think we need to give the golfers a year of no construction activity on the site. And part of the reason for that is with the recent announcement that the Highland Park Country Club course is going to be closing down in 18, I think we want to make sure that we are a alternative location for all of those golfers when they're out and they're looking for where they're going to play with that course closing down. The internal processes, we talked about that early at the Finance Committee with the ERP system that we will be undertaking shortly. I think my only request to the City Council is patience, because this is a monumental task when you think about the fact that we are changing literally all of our software programs that have been in place for the last 20 years. This is not going to happen overnight. I think it's about a 14 to 18 month process to change out these various software programs and modules that we have. But I think at the end of the day, as Alderman Morris indicated, that it's going to provide us with a much more robust system, better controls, financial controls, and so forth than we have right now. And then finally, the budget awareness, and I think with 2017, we saw the development of an asset management program. We refined the core elective program. We implemented the OpenGov program to increase the accessibility of financial information to the community and so forth. And I think we will continue to do that. Again, going back to the earlier point of really trying to educate the community on where their dollars are going and how much it costs to provide some of these services, because we're constantly looking for ways to be more efficient, to look, and Alderman Tack talked about it earlier with respect to the gas lights. Are there ways that we can see a return on any investment that we put in terms of capital? But it's just going to be an ongoing challenge, and I think, if anything, we've learned that we've got, over 17, we've learned that we've got a long way to go, because I think people are, I'll say, blissfully ignorant in that things have been operating so well for so long that now, as we get into really having to make some tough decisions, we need to make sure that people are fully aware of what the costs are for operations and what the pressures are on the city of Lake Forest. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have about any of those.
I have a question. Are these goals that, I don't recall that the city council, are these goals of the staff, or where did these arise?
Yeah, these are the goals that the staff wants to sort of present to the council, that says these are some big overarching goals that some of them have been identified and approved by the city council. Golf course, the Amtrak stop and so forth have been endorsed by this city council. So some of these have been there. Other ones is, I think, that we're presenting to you some of the things that the staff is sensitive to, and the way that we will continue to address some of the issues that come both before the council, but also in terms of educating the public. The budget awareness kinds of things will be the things that the staff will be working on.
So if we wanted to have some input into this, where is our opportunity for that?
You could certainly talk to me if there's anything that you feel is should be added or something that we should think about. Absolutely.
But now you don't want to hear that, we'll do that later, is that?
No, if you have something now, you can certainly, as long as the chair is okay with it.
Yeah, I would just add that, just by way of general reference here, that the annual budget cycle and planning cycle of the city, it's for each fiscal year, which starts May 1st, it involves about 9 months of work. So we adopt a new budget. The last meeting of April, we get much of the summer off, and then we start 9 months of planning and organizing and thinking and budgeting and thinking about priorities and so forth. And all of these strike me as things that are in the priorities and are all things that we've discussed, in one form or another. And where are we? It's the 6th inning of our annual cycle here. Of planning, so it's a good time to sort of, for summary purposes, to look at this. But all of these, there's certainly many smaller things, but these are all, for everybody's knowledge, is that things we've talked about as a council and all kinds of meetings and budget sessions and so forth.
I would just also add, Alderman, that there's really sort of, to pick up on Mayor's comments, there's really 3 opportunities. There's this, and I would say these are the sort of 30,000-foot goals and priorities. Then with my annual evaluation, you also have goals and priorities that you provide me. And then as part of the budget, there are within each of the individual departments, goals and priorities within each of the individual departments that are incorporated into the annual funding.
Well, when I look at this, I look at it's very specific to some areas. I wonder if we might also look, though, at how we communicate with our residents as part of this. I think that including them more even proactively in some of the decisions that we're making might be something that we would undertake as a community and as a city council a little more aggressively. I know earlier in the year we talked a little bit about how we communicate with our residents, and I'd like to see that be a priority going forward, and how we address some of their concerns as well. And so I'd like to see that as a priority goal. Sure. The other thing that has concerned me over the past several council meetings is our West Lake Forest Business District. I think that needs to be addressed, in a thoughtful manner as to how we want that area to develop and what we want it to be when it is developed. And I think otherwise we are addressing one-off issues over there that are having an impact on that entire area. And if we had an overarching plan for that area, I think these decisions would be made much easier. And so I would like to add those two priority goals.
Well, the second one is actually going to be coming forward shortly to the city council because, and it's part of your budget, looking forward to FY19, because staff is recommending that we go back and we update our comprehensive plan. It's been a number of years and some sections of the comprehensive plan have been updated, and proposing that we start that process in 2018. And I think land use is one of the first components that we will be taking a look at. It's not on this list because I guess we see it more as a granular task, but it definitely is something that you'll be seeing here within the next 60, 90 days. Is that right, Kathy? Yeah.
If I may follow up on Alderman Rummel's comments, I know that there are many residents in the Western Business District area that live in the area and have been involved in the past or have had other family members involved in the past and would like very much to be a part of as a community outreach and maybe even, I'll call it an inreach, to be part of economic development and planning and certainly along the lines of our strategic plan and land use and thinking about what do we want that to be and how can we bring it back to a more vibrant area. Certainly there have been some issues with selected properties, but it's like much of retail and service areas just hasn't been as vibrant. Doesn't have the foot traffic that we would like. Doesn't have the community activities that many residents would like to see. So I think we can very easily form a group that is devoted to that type of an activity. And certainly I know Ray Bushman and I would be thrilled, and Melanie, I think you would enjoy that as well. So that's something that we should think about adding to the list and moving forward with.
Yeah, and when we come back, I say we, Kathy comes back, and she will sort of spell out the process, because under your codes, under your regulations, the Plan Commission is the body that holds the public hearings with respect to any modifications to the comprehensive plan. But I think having said that, having a smaller group look at land use issues and so forth, I think is appropriate to do. I think the challenge that you have, though, is, we all have something that we want. The problem is, does the market bear what we want? And I think that's the balance and the challenge that we have, because, for many years I heard we need to have a really good hardware store in town. Well, we have one, but it struggles because not anybody uses it. And I was having a conversation with Alderman Beidler about some restaurants that have come and gone very quickly over in along Waukegan Road there. Yeah. And so that's the balance of the challenge that we have, and I think that's why, going back to sort of that deliberate mindfulness, is that we really have to have thoughtful conversation and not just what emotionally what Bob Kiley may want to have there, but what will the market bear, and who really wants to be there, and so forth. So it's a good process that we've used in the past. I think it's been very thoughtful. The last addition to the comprehensive plan, I think, was the bike plan. And, we had a committee that was in place that looked at it, that debated it, that talked about it, went to the Plan Commission for public hearing, further debated and discussed, and then ultimately came to the council for adoption. So I imagine it'll be some kind of a hybrid system like that.
But Bob, the one thing I heard that really caught my attention that you mentioned, Alderman Moreno, was the events. I mean, we take our, I'm very conscious of this from the Welcome Home campaign, but we take our, outings and celebrations and our gatherings, which we have all over town, or we try to, we take those pretty seriously here. We could do a lot more stuff over there than we do. I mean, if we were more deliberate about, and that's not what the market will bear, let's try something and see if people come, and then give it another try and see if more people come. I mean, I think, and even ticket it a little bit. And so, I mean, but it just feels to me like if we start thinking creatively, we may not be able to get a restaurant established, but maybe we can have a food truck night. I mean, I just think like if we think a little bit more creatively about trying to, get people over there, that we can do that. And so I think we need to do some, and get that, let's get some residents involved. But I'm with Melody. I'd like to see us do more on that. It sounds like Alderman Moreno agrees.
Could I remind everybody
Do we have other things to do tonight?
that we have a very late evening tonight? Okay, I'm not diminishing any of this conversation.
More
'cause it's-
later. Exactly.
Okay.
Fair enough. Yes.
It is very important. I just we have such incredible talent in our community, and I would like to see us engage that for the benefit of our decision-making processes instead of holding it in abeyance to some degree. And so, I think it goes to a lot of our decisions, so,
No,
thank you.
I think we've historically done that. We'll continue to do that going forward.
Exactly.
Just one more point on the financial part. The slides disappeared,
sorry.
but I just want to encourage people to go out to the website because there's a tremendous amount of financial information out there that has a lot of detail in it that the finance team has made available for the public. And you can go out there and see just about everything that's going on in the city at a great level of detail. So I just encourage you to take a look at that and know that that's a resource that's out there.
Very good. I'm going to ask Sally Swarthout and Vince Juarez from Deer Path Golf Course to come up and give us an update, and then Sally, you can stay up and talk about the beach too.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Alderman. Thank you for welcoming to the podium. It's my pleasure tonight to provide a high-level introduction to the positive changes that have been made by Vince Juarez, General Manager of the Deer Path Golf Course and Kemper Sports Management. Vince became the General Manager at Deer Path in December of 2016, and over the course of the past year has created a friendly and dynamic environment at the golf course while providing best in practice customer service to our participants and increasing the utilization of the course throughout the year. In 2017, he introduced 6 new community events and 1 new community service. Vince has increased the golf outings, hosted new golf events, and delivered high-quality service to the league luncheons. In conjunction with working closely with the city staff during the construction period in the fall of 2017, Vince was able to maintain a high level of service to our users throughout the drainage and cart path projects. And to give you a more detailed accounting of the past year, I'm going to invite Vince to the podium and let him take it away.
Thank you very much. Very pleased to be back in front of City Council. I think the last time we were here, we were talking about the July floods, so this is a much better evening for us. Just to kind of go through some of what we're going to talk about here, if we can get the clicker to... Okay, we're going to just to go over a very quick overview of the 2017-2018 outings along with community events, the utilization both on the weekdays and the weekends over at the golf course, give you a 2017 update on the food and beverage side, a membership update from 2017, a clinic update, and the grounds and construction update. We're going to be back in front of City Council in March to kind of go through an entire fiscal outlook for FY18. So we'll go through that in the March meeting. On the outing side, we did increase the outing revenue 36%, 2017 versus 2016 on the calendar year side. We brought in 5 new outings to Deer Path. We brought in the Lake County Farm Bureau, Lake County Juvenile Officers Association, the Wakanda Guns and Hoses event, which is a 144-person shotgun, about 200 people for dinner, police and fire event, the Wakanda Lions Club, and Temple Steel. So those were all new events that we had in 2017. We do have some additional events already booked for 2018. Those 5 events brought in an additional $30,000 in revenue to the golf course. All 5 of those events have rebooked for 2018 for the calendar year, and like I said, we are in the process of booking for 2018 and have brought some additional outings in as well. The 5 events, over 500 new golfers to Deer Path for those outings. Most of our golf outings are traditional modified shotgun starts. We do some shotgun starts on the weekdays. We also do some modified shotguns on the weekends. And the purpose for the modified shotgun on the weekends is we don't want to disrupt our golfers, our residents, and some of the people that are out there on a daily basis. So we kind of stagger our starts and make sure that we can still maximize the golf course, but also have the ability for the residents and for the other players to play on a daily basis. Like I said, we've started the rebooking process for 2018. That's in full force. Priority dates on our side go to the returning outings on the golf outing side. Mr. Kiley has mentioned already tonight that Highland Park Country Club has closed for 2018. We have made contact with all 12 of their golf outings that were at Highland Park that we're hoping to bring some of those, if not all of those, over to Deer Path in 2018. Contracts are out for all of the May, June, and July events already for 2018. The events, like I said, are scheduled to maximize green fee revenue while allowing for daily play. So that's the purpose. That's why we do modified shotguns, and tee time events. Beverage carts were on course for all of the events. Some of the community events that we had for 2017, we had a movie out on the patio. The patio, for those of you that in the audience, was built in 2017. We opened it Memorial Day weekend of 2017. We hosted a movie on the patio night. It was the greatest game ever played, where we invited all of the youth and some of their adults, but mostly youth, out to the golf course. We let the parents have kind of a night out, go to dinner, do some shopping, catch up on what have you. But the kids, they had a great time. We served popcorn. We played the movie. They played out on the driving range a little bit in the dark, played some laser tag, and had really just a fun evening. We hosted a Cub Scout campout in October. Thank you to Mr. Borkowski, who's a resident of Lake Forest. I contacted Mr. Borkowski. It just came up in conversation, actually, that I'm involved in the Boy Scouts in our council, and Mr. Borkowski's involved down here. So we were able to get all 4 Cub Scout packs from Lake Forest, extend an invitation to them. We hosted a campout out on the driving range in October. It was a rainy October night. We did have to evacuate about 3 o'clock in the morning, but they came for dinner. They had a movie out on the patio. They came back for breakfast on Saturday morning, so they had a lot of fun, and we're hoping that we can host that event. Beverages at the beach, we did partner with the city. Thank you very much, and thank you to you all as well. We did partner with the city and provided the beer and wine sales down at the beach from July through September. It was a fun couple-month process for us. Looking forward to continuing to partner with the city. We held some book clubs, yacht clubs, a global event this year. We lit up the golf course one September night and had a global event for the residents. And then, of course, our annual club championship event. This is just a picture of our women's club championship. You've got some residents in that picture, some non-residents, but a great time had by all. This is a picture of during the day for the Cub Scout camp out. This is the Cub Scouts setting up their tents out on the driving range. We were able to close down the driving range that Friday night about 3 o'clock, pick the driving range, pick all the golf balls off the range, set up the camp out, and then have the driving range open the next day for the golfers that were out there. This is a weekday utilization chart for the facility, and this is something that extremely proud of. I don't know if you can see it, but the first one is the weekday utilization. This talks about utilization 2017 versus 2016. Weekday utilization for us is about 53.9% on average, but from 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock in the morning, the utilization is near 85%, 80% during the week in 2017 versus 60% back in 2016. So we were able to bring the utilization up during the week about 15% during those peak prime time early morning slots. This is the dynamic pricing in its best. You know, move the price up when you can, lower the price when you have to, but put the players out on the golf course. Weekend utilization. Utilization back in 2016 was 56.6% on the week, for the weekends. From that 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. time frame, it was 66% back in 2016. 2017, from that same 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. period, it was near 97% utilized, the golf course. So when we talk about maximizing revenue, we're really talking about increasing price on the dynamic price structure for the available tee times where we can demand that increase in price. We cannot, based on the utilization, we're not going to be able to create any additional tee times. So we're going to have to move on some dynamic pricing side. But 97% utilized, and just to kind of give you kind of an industry average, weekend industry averages are about 55%. And our average is 65 for the weekend, with that 97% utilized from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Kind of a golf department update. Year-to-date, the greens fees were 12% favorable to the same period in FY17, and I'd like to mention that's with rounds being down in 2017, and the rounds were down in 2017 mainly because of the July floods. And then we had some weather issues in October and early November as well. So greens fees year-to-date, 12% favorable to the same period in 2017 with that lower round count. Cart fee revenue was severely impacted with the floods and non-cart days in FY18. So even though greens fees were up, cart revenue was severely impacted. Membership revenue was favorable to 2017. I'll go through that here in a little bit. We were up 4 permanent tee times from 2017. That helped increase that utilization to near 97%. Total weekend utilization up 9% from FY17, 66% utilized in FY18 versus 57% for the same period, and that's the entire weekend population there. I already mentioned weekend morning utilization near 97%. Year-to-date merchandise cost of goods sold percentage was reduced 20% in FY18. Payroll in the golf department year-to-date, we reduced it 29%, FY18 versus 17, and overall OPEX has been reduced 6% year-to-date, FY18 versus 17, and 4% from budget so far. On the food and beverage side, we rolled out our new menu in May of 2017. We are going to update that menu beginning in May of 18. We've featured primarily burgers, sandwiches, wraps, salads, appetizers, and breakfast items on the weekends. And we will spend some time working with our vendors to, again, revamp that menu again in 2018. The grill was open daily during the season. Typically, the hours were 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Sometimes we were open longer. Sometimes we were open earlier, just depending on demand. Beverage carts were available for all the events, and they were available on the weekends as well. And our beverage cart staff and our beverage cart did kind of double duty during the summer. It also provided some service down at the beach. As Sally had mentioned, we hosted several league luncheons, seven league luncheons, 26 outing luncheons and/or dinners, plus daily lunch and dinner, an increase of 7 food and beverage events in the calendar year 2017. We had over 12,000 food orders from May through September. 15,000 beers were sold from May through September 2017, an increase from 12,000, almost 13,000 beers for the same period last year. We had very significant weekend and outing usage of the patio. It was not uncommon to see the weekend golfers staying around till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon to have lunch, have dinner out on the patio, and it was regular to have the ladies' leagues and some of the morning golfers, both the juniors and the ladies, stay and have lunch out on the patio once they were done during the week. Year-to-date, total food and beverage revenue so far is up 7%, and I did give you this figure, $162,758 back in 2016, $173,410 here in 2017. Year-to-date food revenue favorable to the same period in 2016 by 6%, the beer revenue favorable by 11%, and payroll again was reduced 22% from FY17. And OPEX reduced 41 from FY17. So revenue's up, payroll and expenses are down. Just a picture of the patio in use one Saturday afternoon. On the membership side, Membership revenue collected is favorable to the same period in 2016. We picked up 7 new memberships this year, calendar year 2017, from Highland Park. And that was kind of as Highland Park was kind of shutting down and just trying to figure out what they were going to do. We had some golfers, and also with the floods in July, Highland Park closed for several weeks. We picked up some golfers mid-season with those floods. We picked up 3 memberships from Fox Lake up in the northern suburbs in 2017. Membership rates are going to increase in calendar year 18. It's the first rate increase since 2014. On the clinic side, Drive Golf has changed its name to Discover Golf in 2017. We've partnered, and the city has partnered with Richard Franklin with Discover Golf for several years. He provides a junior program. He has over about 120 juniors in his program, and they run really all year. He was at the golf course this evening when I drove by. 1-week classes were offered in 2017 to drive additional summer registration. The clinic revenue was favorable to 2016 by $20,000. And the winter classes are being held now at Deer Path Golf Course. We have extended Richard's contract through 2020 at this time. On the ground side, the cart paths are installed on holes 1 through 16. The continuous cart path project. Holes 17 and 18 will be completed in the spring of 2018. We put down approximately 11,200 feet of the 11,500 total feet of the 2-inch drainage has been installed. 11 of approximately 23 truckloads of sod has been put down. The remaining sod will be put down in early spring as well. All the 4-inch, 6-inch, and 8-inch drainage has been put in, and that will be useful here right away in the spring. And this is just a couple pictures of as the construction started on the cart paths. We've got the first picture, which is the turf being torn up. We've got the gravel base, and then the finished product on the right. So very pleased with the construction process. This will allow us to keep the golf course open, keep carts running when we normally would have had to close due to rain and weather events. Any questions that anybody has?
Well, that's quite a tour de force of a report. Excellent work in a short period of time, and more to come, I gather, from the plans I've seen. And thank you very much. Any particular questions, comments?
Terrific.
Thank you.
Just terrific, and I think we'd probably like to pull some of that detail out just to remind people why we are investing in the course and how pleased we are with what's going on. So you're a piece of that. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're helping to get it done.
I thought I heard a promise earlier to talk about upcoming developments for 2018.
Mr. Kiley did mention upcoming developments, so we were sitting in the back talking about that. So 2018 is a year that we're going to concentrate on continued revenue growth as well, putting more people out on the golf course, maximizing the tee times that we have available, bringing the rounds count back to normal. We lost July, we lost October, concentrating right now on building memberships, building loyalty cards, and building the outings. That's what I'm working on right now. There's been some discussion as far as continued capital projects, as far as construction. I know we're in discussion at this time as far as what we're going to do in 2018 and take some lead. There's been some discussion on some continuous drainage work, halfway house, kind of comfort station. There's been a lot of different discussions going on, so that'll be more to come.
How many people attended your special events? That was a great list of special events. I'm just wondering what your response was to some of those.
Anytime you start doing different events, it starts off slowly. The movie on the patio, I think we had about 25 kids that were there. The Glow Ball event, we had, memory serves, about 16 players, all residents from Lake Forest. We did it. We did it on a night in September that worked around our outing calendar and some other things that we had going on around the BMW, different events that we had, and it was on the same night as, I believe, homecoming for the high school. So we've got to change that date a little bit next year. So the events are growing. The yacht club was an event that we did for the Lake Forest Yacht Club. I believe it's maybe a private yacht club down, and they brought their residents up for like a pizza party, a pizza party. We opened the clubhouse, let them use the clubhouse at no charge. We handled the beer sales and the alcohol sales on our side, and it was a pizza party for them. So trying to open up the clubhouse for different uses, trying to sell it to different types of events, not just golf events, because the patio is such a nice fixture at the facility. We can host a lot more than just golf. So that's what we're trying to do. The eclipse party that we had was an impromptu little function. It was, it was an afternoon where we had, I think it was 10 or 12 ladies that were out there having lunch, and the next thing you know, it turns into we're gonna stay, we're gonna view the eclipse. We went down to the maintenance barn, we grabbed our soldering helmets, which you could look directly at it. We provided them for everybody else, and everybody had a great time. They stuck around, had an extra cocktail or two.
I love that, and I think the more special events that we have in this community, the more it goes to the number one priority that you had on your list, which is creating a sense of community. So thank you for doing those.
You're welcome.
And I think that's probably a good lead into the next agenda item. Sally and Vince, do you want to talk about the proposed modifications to the liquor license at the beach?
All right, I'm back. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the extended partnership that we had with Kemper Sports at the beach operations. So in the first week in July of 2017, Kemper Sports Management was asked to be the alcohol vendor for the pilot program located at Forest Park Beach. Within a week, Vince and his team were able to obtain the necessary liquor licenses and begin service at the beach location. The service was offered on Friday and Saturday evenings from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m., and Kemper provided professional staff that served a wide selection of beer and wine from their beverage cart. They were all positive reviews from the police department, the beach staff, and the customers utilizing the service. Kemper was also able to provide beverage service to a new event at Forest Park Beach that was hosted by Dickinson Hall in early September. And at this time, Kemper has proposed taking over all beach concession operations for the 2018 season, and I'm going to let Vince detail that as well.
Thank you. So we had Dean Litton's in the back of the room, Regional Operations Executive for Kemper Sports. Dean and I had a chance to sit down with Sally and a couple other staff members to kind of talk about the beach and give a recap of the services that we provided in 2017, and just kind of talk about some strengths, weaknesses, and kind of where we thought might be able to assist. So and I'll make this as quick as I possibly can. Some of the strengths that we notice at the beach is, over 30,000 visits a year, and I said this to Sally and Mr. Kiley as well. It is probably the cleanest beach I've ever stepped foot on. It is absolutely gorgeous. It was a pleasure to be down there. Strong community programming from the Parks Department, different events, the sailing, the preschools, the separate use beaches. So you really have an area for each individual person to use a section of the beach as they see fit. Some of the weaknesses that we observe, just the lack of parking, and I know that's come up several times. The snack shop location, kind of tucked back in the corner. Some of the food options. The real limitation on the food side is the fact that there's no fryer at the beach. When you talk about quick food service items for some of those programming, some of those kids, you're talking about some of the fried foods. Bike racks as well. Beach operations for 2017, what we did down at the beach. We obtained both the state and local liquor license in under 24 hours. I still remember when the call came in and said, this is what we need to do. And we were able to obtain Illinois state liquor license in under 24 hours, and with the help of the city, obtain the city license as well. We staffed the beach upon that 24 hours, and we're ready to sell. We transported our beverage cart down to the beach every Friday and Saturday, and then we transported it back to the golf course the next morning in order to be used out on site at Deer Path. We opened on time by 4 p.m. each Friday and Saturday. We cross-trained our staff both at the beach and the golf course, and we really provided a community service to all the Lake Forest residents. Some of the food ideas down at the beach, really quick food service options: hamburgers, chicken sandwiches, tacos, deli sandwiches, chicken fingers, pre-made salads, fries, ice cream, chicken fingers, chips, candy, anything that's quick and easily served. On the food and beverage side, what we provide is we provide consistent best-in-class service, much like we do at the golf course, and increasing revenue and increasing throughput at the golf course, best-in-class service to the residents, efficient, well-trained staff, consistent food options, excellent beer options, and quality and good partners with the city. This is just a picture that was provided. This is the area that we sold alcohol last year, 2017. Staffing, hourly bar staffing, hourly food service and concessions, the beach supervisor, June, July, and August, and just kind of a picture of the staff that was on site down at the beach last year. Events, we're in discussion right now with the city staff just to kind of brainstorm some different events that we can do down at the beach, whether it be music at the lake, some senior events, private parties, assisting with the Parks and Rec on the programming, canoe races, and just some other private events and public events that we can do down at the beach. Kind of some next steps for us would be to obtain both an Illinois and a local liquor license once again for the beach. We piggybacked off our existing license at Deer Path in 2017. We would have to obtain a new one in 2018. Obtain a food permit to be able to sell at the beach. Work with the city to finalize a location to sell the alcohol. Start hiring and start training that staff, both Serve Safe and TIPS certified, which is a requirement by the city and by the state. Work with our current vendors that we have at Kemper Sports and with Deer Path to open separate accounts for both food and alcohol, so we can keep all those accounts separate, and obtain the required insurance through Kemper Sports. Questions that anybody has kind of on the beach operations that we had this year in 2017, or any other questions?
Sally, could you maybe address to Alderman Rummel's question about what some of the activities are that Parks and Rec are looking at to supplement Vince's presentation?
I'm happy to address some of the upcoming events that are taking place down at the beach or planned for the beach this year in 2018. We are going to continue to have our movie at the beach. We do it in July. It's a Christmas countdown, so we will be bringing that back. It was very widely received last year. Santa Claus was there. It was a great event. We are going to continue to have our open mic nights. We will also be hosting the 3rd annual Cardboo or Canoe Regatta, which continues to grow in participation, and I encourage everybody to have a team and come on down. We provide the cardboard and the duct tape and all the fun stuff, and you build it, and then you sail it. We also will be hosting the U.S. Junior Olympic Sailing Festival this year. We tend to host every 2 years, and we're always excited when our year lands in an actual Olympic year. It's Winter Olympics this year, but we still count it. We have a few new events that we are going to be bringing forward. We are actually going to offer 2 concerts at the lakefront this summer, one in July, one in August, as a test. And then we will also be introducing family game nights, both video and traditional board games, as well as karaoke opportunities and opportunity for open mic. We also have a few other events in the planning stages and maybe presented as pop-ups that are quite exciting.
Great. Thank you, Sally.
You're welcome. I'm very excited. It's going to be a fun year down at the lakefront.
I can't help this, but having been chair of the Recreation Subcommittee of the Shorefront Commission 34 years ago, we had not envisioned karaoke and a few of those other things, but we evolve with the times, don't we?
We do.
And,
we do.
That's wonderful. Exactly. You know, a lot of it's trial and error, but, you know, you have to sort of go forth with what people are inclined to attend, so.
Correct.
good.
And, you know, as Vince indicated, sometimes activities and events start out slow, but then they build as word gets out amongst the community. So we're hoping that helps some of these snowball. So that brings me to my purpose.
Yes.
I'm here tonight to request approval of an ordinance modifying the Class K liquor license for Forest Park Beach from a one-week renewable license to an annual license, and to modify the current fee associated with that license, and also, if determined to be appropriate, to waive first reading and grant final approval.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
This is a roll call vote.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that completes my report for this evening.
Thank you. Next is comments by council members, and I would ask Alderman Reisenberg to please speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the residents who came forward to voice their concerns regarding the payments to the lobbying firm in relation to the pedestrian underpass and Amtrak stop at the Everett Telegraph Road train station. It's important that you are aware of the actions the City Council has taken since our last meeting. Earlier this meeting at the Finance Committee, Alderman Morris outlined several initial recommendations for accounting practice modifications. For those of you who missed the meeting, they include the Finance Committee Chair receiving and reviewing the monthly contingency report, verification of expenditure approval via the contingency request form prior to incurring the expense, adopting a policy where any third-party payments made through an intermediary receive council approval or acknowledgement, and a request that the audit committee include the general fund contingency accounts in the audit letter and a report at the audit committee meeting when the audit is presented. In addition to the actions of the Finance Committee, City Council met in executive session for approximately 4 hours following our last City Council meeting on December 18th. The mayor, city manager, and city attorney were not in attendance. We reconvened the following day, Tuesday, December 19th, and met for approximately 3 hours. At those meetings, we interviewed many present and former city officials individually as part of our fact-finding process. We also discussed personnel matters, along with financial controls, compliance, organizational issues that impact a desired financial management and governance culture. As a result of those discussions, and because of the confines of the Open Meeting Act, Council decided several days later, after those meetings were complete, to engage outside counsel to provide an independent and comprehensive review of this matter. Tonight, the council will be asked to ratify our agreement with Lee Jeter. Ms. Jeter has been recommended to conduct the independent investigation due to her background, qualifications, and experience conducting individual reviews of workplace matters. Prior to opening her private practice in 2017, Ms. Jeter was a partner at Claire Baird Smith, and prior to that worked for Cyphers Shaw. While at Claire Baird Smith, Ms. Jeter was retained in 2011 by the city to conduct an independent investigation. In all dealings with Ms. Jeter, she exhibited the utmost legal knowledge, integrity, and professionalism. She will be providing City Council with an update regarding the investigation later this evening when we convene into executive session. She will also be continuing to collect all relevant data, scheduling and conducting interviews, and upon conclusion, reporting her findings to City Council. We encourage anyone who would like to submit information to Ms. Jeter to do so. Parties may drop off information directed to her attention at City Hall or request her contact information. Her information is available tonight as well. We anticipate an update in February and a full report when the review is completed. We thank you in advance for your interest, time, and patience as we pursue this important matter. Please be assured that City Council is taking residents' concerns very seriously and ensuring a thorough, independent review of all pertinent information. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Pursuant to those actions in recent days and weeks, presented for approval tonight is the ratification of engagement of special counsel regarding these practices and procedures. So we need a motion to do that.
Second.
This is a roll call vote.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
7 yeas, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. Next is opportunity for citizens to address City Council on non-agenda items. I've received a number of requests, probably 15 or more. And as before, any person wishing to speak during public comment should fill out a request form and submit it to City Clerk. And the forms are located at the back of the room. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes so that we can get to hear everyone. And we ask that you do not repeat comments from previous speakers. Now, there's one caveat for tonight that we would ask you to observe. If you have comments that relate to the retention of the lobbying firm or accounting practices and controls as we described earlier this evening, we request that you submit your information directly to the independent legal counsel, Lee Jeter, rather than present it to City Council to respect and support the external independent review of these matters. Thank you. First is Amy Franchetic, is it? 1322 Deer Path.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the City Council. I'm Amy Francetic, and I live on West Deer Path in the Meadowwood neighborhood. We bought our home in 2005 and chose Meadowwood because of its proximity to the Middle Fork Savannah. We are outdoor enthusiasts. In addition to being a wife and mother, during the day, I run investing for a clean energy company called Invenergy in Chicago. I have worked in the energy industry for over a dozen years. I have also served on the Lake Forest Caucus for 3 years. Additionally, I ran Governor Rauner's and Mayor Emanuel's Energy and Environment Transition Committees. I'm here today to voice my opposition to the proposed third rail. For the last few years, I have been very concerned about the potential for train accidents in Lake Forest due to the increasing number of freight trains that carry explosive materials. Lake Forest train lines are high-traffic routes for oil companies transporting crude oil from Alberta, Canada to refineries in the Gulf of Mexico. These so-called bomb trains have caused millions of dollars of damage and even loss of life in accidents across the country and in Canada. The Lac-Mégantic tragedy in 2013 in Quebec resulted in the death of 47 people and the destruction of the entire downtown. There is a lot of risk for the communities around the railways carrying this toxic freight. That is why, as a community, we need to protect ourselves from these increased risks. The accident that occurred in Lake Forest last March on the Union Pacific line, where hazardous material trains derailed, should be viewed as a warning of things to come. We were very lucky that none of the toxic material leaked from those tanks. It is very rare for a derailment not to result in leakage. This was not the case last July when oil tankers derailed in Plainfield, Illinois. An estimated 40,000 gallons of oil leaked from the 20 or so tanker cars that derailed. Can you imagine what 40,000 gallons of oil or other hazardous material would do to Lake Forest, where so many people and protected species live near the train tracks? It really concerns me. Lastly, our forefathers, like the Armors of Lake Forest, had the great wisdom and generosity to bequest acres of land to create Lake Forest open lands and the Middle Fork Savanna. They foresaw a protected open space that could be enjoyed by everyone and could also be a safe haven for dozens of endangered species. As you know, Middle Fork Savanna also includes several environmentally sensitive wetlands that feed into the North Branch of the Chicago River. Chicago Wilderness has identified Middle Fork Savanna as one of the most important sites for biodiversity in Illinois. I think the Armors would be rolling over in their graves if they thought this protected open space would become a parking lot for freight trains. The environmental threat of air and noise pollution to this pristine treasure is something that we must stand united against today and in the future. This is an important legacy of Lake Forest that we should try extra hard to preserve for future generations. To the City Council, Mayor Lansing, and the city staff, please do not allow this third rail to proceed. Please protect Lake Forest citizens from health risks of derailments. And please protect the Middle Fork Savanna from pollution. And please preserve the wonderful legacy that has attracted so many of us to settle here in Lake Forest.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Next, Carla Oha, 1401 West Deer Path.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. My family and I recently moved here to Lake Forest from the Philadelphia area and settled in the Meadowwood subdivision as well. The open lands in Lake Forest, particularly the Middle Forks Savanna, were an enormous draw to us as we made our decision about where to settle. And I realize it's one of the many jewels in the crown of Lake Forest, and I, like Mrs. Francetic, would hate to see it destroyed. I'm also addressing the possibility of the third rail coming through in Lake Forest at the longest and widest part of the Middle Fork Savanna, which has globally threatened ecosystems. It's one of the most important sites for biodiversity in northeastern Illinois. And it's crucial to a number of species who need large open spaces for survival. So I wonder how you do reconcile this possibility with such a jewel. Right now, rails to trails is popular. And adding more rails to trails seems very retroactive. And I would like to, as a resident, in addition to respectfully request, as this is a concern to so many of us, in the light of open discussion with residents and transparency, that this item, as it remains an issue for so many and a worry for so many, appear on the agenda of future meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Frank Nimmersheim, 1111 Pine Oak Circle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. I'd like to go on the record as a member of Citizens for Action to say that we have a serious concern about Jack Reisenberg being appointed the primary contact on the City Council for Lee Jeter's assignment. This is due to his outward hostility towards our organization and specifically our president, Joanne Desmond. For example, on October 26th, in an email from Jack Reisenberg to Ray Bushman regarding Joanne Desmond, he stated, "She is totally out of control. My advice is to distance yourself from her." On November 11th, in an email from Jack Reisenberg to Don Schoenheider, his comment was, "Drama queen is really out of control." On December 8th, in an email from Jack to Rob Lansing, Bob Kiley, regarding Miss Desmond, another rant from the drama queen. Only this time he went farther and CC'd Councilman Tack, Morris, and Newman on the email, which is a violation of the Open Meetings Act. Also take note that he did not send this email to any female member of the council, Michelle Moreno, Melanie Rummel, and Prue Beadler, or to Alderman Bushman, who I guess is now since he expressed some concern about our findings during our investigation, he's out. He's not part of the old boys network, so to speak. And in his tirade at the end of the December 4th meeting, which anybody can look at online, he stated he's convinced that we're all wrong about the third rail. We don't know what we're doing. He called this intellectually arrogant. And during the same time, when Ray Bushman attempted to say something, he looked at him and said, "Ray's in bed with them, for God's sake."
Mr. Nemersheim, in deference to lots of other folks who wish to speak.
Let me give you my recommendations and I'll walk away. Is that fair? It'll take 30 seconds.
Very quickly, please.
We recommend that Mr. Reisenberg step down from the position of representing the city council. 2, we would further recommend that a new member be appointed to work with the outside counsel during her assignment. And 3, the individual appointed should not be considered part of the old guard or
All
the
right, that's
boys
enough.
network. Thank you.
Next is Rick Dahl, 1660 Cornell Court in Lake Forest.
Good evening. Freedom of Information Act. For over 9 months, the Action Group has filed over 30 requests for documents under the Freedom of Information Act with the City of Lake Forest, Metro, IDOT, and WisDOT. Response to these requests, primarily from Lake Forest and Metro, have been marked by stonewalling, denials, or simply ignoring our request. At the December 4th City Council meeting, immediately following the lobbying exposure, Alderman Rummel inquired why the FOIA requests have been consistently denied or ignored. The city clerk in response claimed that the city was simply following protocol. Alderman Rummel then suggested that action be with the city clerk to discuss and resolve the issue. Ironically, on December 27th, the Action Group received over 1,000 documents from the city, many of which covered prior requests which had been denied. Metro has yet to respond to any of the Action FOIA requests. On January 3rd of this year, representatives of the Action Group met with the city clerk and representative of the Philippini law firm in an attempt to clarify and interpret the underlying FOIA requirements governing the release of documents. It was resolved that the city would improve on their efforts to respond to Action FOIA requests going forward. Action then delivered 6 additional FOIA requests to the city, which the Philippine representative acknowledged as having been served. The Action intent was to have these documents available for tonight's council meeting. Denial of all 6 was received 5 days later. with further delays like these documents, which were directly related to information regarding the city manager, are not available and present at this tonight's meeting.
Next, Nancy Cooley, 1751 Stanford Court, Lake Forest.
Good evening. I'm Nancy Cooley, 1751 Stanford Court. Think Amtrak stop. Council members, we didn't question the addition of the new Amtrak stop because we were more concerned about the third rail. However, because we know they are now linked, we reviewed the letters on the city website and called some of the companies offering support for the new Amtrak stop. This seems to be a very lopsided business opportunity. If you take the time to review even a couple of the letters, you will quickly see they were responding to a request and a form letter presented by Mr. Kiley. All basically state the same type of support and are all very vague. One factor unknown to all companies we called is a ticket cost difference between Amtrak and Metro lines. It's not easy to compare the costs, but it could be the difference between a $45 to $50 one-day round-trip ticket on Amtrak compared to a $14 round trip on Metro. Several letters stated the statistics shared by the Navy base: 40,000 student sailors, 21,000 military members, government service civilian employees and their families. Wow, big potential ridership. That was really impressive. Because of these impressive numbers, we called the Navy first. We checked with the public affairs and community outreach officer. He knew about the Amtrak stop and had been in the briefing that Norm Carlson had done with the new captain when he arrived. We heard the following: the Navy does not currently utilize Amtrak for movement of people around the Chicago area, and they are not envisioning the need for it. They move people from major airports, the two around us, with buses, and they have their own Metro train stop at the base, on the Union Pacific North Line. Frankly, we were stunned. The largest potential user of a new Amtrak stop in Lake Forest saw no reason to send people west. We also spoke with Brunswick. They have people coming from the south and a few from Wisconsin. They didn't know where these people live. We spoke with Trustmark. They rely on Conway Business Park to bus people from both train stations. They do not know if driving to Milwaukee would help their Wisconsin commuters, and ticket cost would be a ridership factor. We called Abbott, and they said that the city and Amtrak made presentations years ago, and there were no facts or figures. The request for company support was very simplistic, very high level, and it's hard to get good employees to the northern suburbs. None of these companies had data on ridership. Council members, what exactly does Lake Forest get from an Amtrak stop? Where is the business case? Where is the supporting documentation? Why are we spending $13 million on an underpass when we don't even know if people will use it and will benefit? And Mr. Kiley, you said tonight, does the market really support this? We need to know.
Next is Emily Houlihan, 170 North Savannah Court.
Thank you so much. I have attended many meetings on the topic of the third rail, and I've heard the City Council say that they are in lockstep opposition to the building of the third rail. I believe this is true. I think it's safe to say that the residents of Lake Forest are also universally opposed to the construction of a third rail. Having idling freight trains in our Savannah and near our schools will negatively impact our quality of life, our property values, and our safety. What I cannot understand is why our city manager spent so much money and time and effort and political capital trying to get an Amtrak stop, which I personally fail to see as a benefit to the residents of Lake Forest at all. In fact, I think it will create parking issues, traffic issues, and will make living on the west side of those tracks so unappealing that the property values over there will go down. And they've done nothing to try to stop the third rail. If the city of Lake Forest has no jurisdiction over the railroad, which I have heard them claim repeatedly, then why did the city manager spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and countless hours to influence the railroad for an Amtrak stop? Can we expect the same investment in human and financial resources to stop the third siding rail for freight trains? Not putting every resource possible in stopping the environmental assessment for the third rail directly contradicts the Lake Forest Sustainability Plan of July 2016 that identifies the air pollution hazards of diesel fuel and establishes a goal of reducing idling. Where is the cost-benefit study to prove an economic benefit to the city of Lake Forest and its residents from having an Amtrak stop? Is there a cost-benefit study? And if so, may we see it? Why invest so heavily in the pursuit of an Amtrak stop that has questionable benefits to our city and its residents? With all due respect, I believe the mayor and the city manager are giving the council and the residents a sedative with regard to the third rail. And the sedative is, don't worry, this will never happen. They will never get funding, and we can't do anything anyway. Believe me, we all want to take that drug. And I love hearing those words. We all love hearing those words, and I want to believe them, but I don't think that they're true. Metro would not have spent the vast amounts of money and political capital that they've spent without a reasonable expectation of funding. And there is something the city can do. They did it for the Amtrak stop. It's time to start fighting this project now before it's too late. Hire counsel, hire lobbyists, do whatever it takes to stop this from happening. Please. Thank you.
Next, David Tanaka, 1142 Pine Oaks. David not here?
Yes, sir.
I needed to get my reading glasses on, sorry. David Tanaka from the Pine Oaks Association. Thank you for the opportunity. As the council may know, Lee Jeter met yesterday with members of Action to discuss her engagement by the city council. And while council members may or may not have been briefed on the meeting, I did want to offer our perspective on it. According to Ms. Jeter, she has been retained by the city, which is paying her hourly bills, and she reports solely to the city council, either as a whole or through Alderman Reisenberg. She reported to us that she was engaged to review, quote, personnel-type issues regarding the lobbying contracts, close quote, that some members of the city council first became aware of on November 30th, 2017, but she said she didn't clearly understand the scope of her engagement. She had not been told to include, quote, the culture, close quote, at City Hall in her inquiry. She has no engagement letter with the city. We asked for a copy of her CV and we got it the next day. She said that the focus of the inquiry was the mayor, the city manager, and the finance department, but it was not clear whether she had been instructed not to share information with the latter. She had been instructed not to share information with or take direction from the mayor, the city manager, or the city attorney, Filippini. To date, she has interviewed, or at least as of yesterday, she had interviewed all of the council members and reviewed a number of the documents supplied by city personnel. She said she plans to conduct additional interviews, but not with Norm Carlson of Metro or the city attorney. At the meeting, the Action members supplied a number of documents to her, some of which she had previously reviewed, and we explained the significance of those records. She understood her engagement does include violations of law and ethical provisions by both city attorneys and outside advisors, but that the city's attorney's involvement is not included. She asked us which laws or ethical provisions could be at issue, a question we answered. She understood that the mayor, the city manager, and the city attorney would be excluded from any executive session of the council, and she did not mention whether others would be excluded. She added that the issue of non-compliant FOIA requests by the city was not included in the scope of her work. Ms. Jeter did not know whether a letter of communication from the city was sent identifying her or requesting cooperation of the city employees. She said she is working alone on this matter. She added she's done work for the city on other matters, including those in which she reported to the city manager and conferred with the city attorney, whom she referred to as Vic. At the conclusion of her inquiry, Ms. Jeter expects to prepare a report which she described as a personnel report, but there is no deadline for it. Remarkably, the City Council action today ratified a resolution hiring her to review, quote, practices and procedures, close quote, not personnel matters. She said she would only expand the scope of her work as she understood it if she received specific authorization from the council. At the close of the meeting, Action pledged to provide whatever additional information she asked for or needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Sarsfield, 1808 Princeton Court.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. In regard to the potential Amtrak stop in West Lake Forest, I think we all know that the building of the pedestrian underpass is a key part of this. So in an attempt to understand the chronology of the steps that have gone into the underpass project, we looked at some of the information that was available. Going back to the original 2010 to 2012 period, Lake Forest was awarded $2 million in funds split evenly between the state and federal agencies for design and construction of the railroad underpass. The projected cost at that time was $2.8 million and a completion date of December of 2014. Whoops. In March of 2012 at an IDOT meeting, were discussed the cost responsibilities. Lake Forest was to use all of the awarded dollars from the states, $1 million, and from the feds, $1 million. And Lake Forest was also to cover the balance of the costs, including any additional engineering fees and the cost of any special waste handling requirements. Another year and a half after that, another IDOT meeting, the estimate for the projected construction cost was increased to $5 million. It was noted that the shortfall versus the available funds needed to be addressed. Another year and a half later, in April 2015, Lake Forest was notified that a balance of $560,000 of state funds would no longer be available to Lake Forest for the underpass project, since Lake Forest had failed to obligate the funds by the end of the state's fiscal year 2014. In a letter in January 2016 from Hanson Engineering to the Lake Forest Superintendent of Engineering, they gave an updated and very detailed breakdown of the newly projected construction costs. The revised total was projected to be $13 million, including $2.5 million of engineering fees. It's been noted that it might come up short of that, but I don't think I would take that to the bank. In March of 2016, the City Council approved an agreement with Hanson Engineering to provide an engineering concept study with supplemental design fees for the Phase 2 study. The exact amounts projected for the study are not currently known, but should be clarified on the public record, given the significant past forecasting problems we've had as to how we spend our engineering money. So, wrapping it up, as concerned citizens, we really feel that we should have a better understanding of the following and hope that the city administration will take these into account. One, how our taxpayer monies have been spent to date on this underpass project. Two, why there has not been more transparency regarding the behind-the-scenes financial commitments which have been made. Three, who is expected to pay the exorbitant future costs of a project which started at $2.8 million and is currently projected at $13 million and possibly rising? And lastly, and most importantly, why should we have a degree of confidence that the management of this project will improve as the future of this project unfolds? Thank you.
Next, Renee Settles, 544 Lexington.
Mr. Mayor, can
get the next person, let them know that they'll be next. It might, because the
Okay.
hour's getting kind of late, it just might.
All right, next, Ron
Renee
Puzinski.
Siddles. I was waiting.
Yeah, no, it's just alerting the next person. So please, proceed.
Oh, sorry. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Thank you for the opportunity. Over the last 1.5 years, I've been astounded how city officials have had issues with recording truth from fiction in answers to the citizens' legitimate questions, including my own. A first citizens' question has always been, why didn't the City Council bring the third rail project to light before the EA was released in October of 2016? The city manager denied at the City Council meeting in the fall 2016 having ever received email invitations, later acknowledges this, and then said that he thought they were not important and claimed he himself never participated. However, in one of our FOIA documents, WisDOT thanked the city manager by name for participating in the Chicago-Milwaukee Agency Coordination webinar, specifically set up for this project. A question was raised by the former mayor at the City Council meeting of December 6, 2016. Why did it take so long to respond to address project issues? The city manager responds that there is no record that the city participated in the webinars concerning the third rail. However, according to the minutes we have of the December 2, 2014 meeting about this third rail project, the city manager is recorded asking whether the construction of the third rail will help Lake Forest's chance of getting an Amtrak stop. Citizens have always wondered if and what the connection is between the Amtrak stop and consent by the city with the third rail. Written by Mr. Kiley in an email of January 11, 2018, he says, neither Amtrak, Metra, WisDOT, nor IDOT have ever linked these projects or made them a quid pro quo, as some would want to make you believe. Citizens of Actions would like you to know that on January 31, 2017, the city manager circulated a confidential memo to the city's lobbyists, WisDOT, IDOT, and Metra, seeking guidance on the resolutions to circumvent the City Council's own resolution reserving judgment on the third rail project. Mr. Kiley's resolution, in part, would have termed the third rail project reasonable and acceptable to the community in exchange for the city's strong recommendation that an Amtrak stop be included in the mix. Last but not least, what is the significance of the fact that the city and Metra hired the same lobbyist, even though they are supposed to have goals that are at odds with each other? Again, the mayor and the city manager, Kiley, have said on multiple occasions that there is no tie between construction of the third rail and the Amtrak stop. However, we by now know that the city secretly hired the same lobbyist Metra was using to help Metra secure approval of the third rail project. We really need you to know at the same time the city was paying the lobbyist almost $200,000 and sharing information with Metra in an effort to secure an Amtrak stop, Metra was paying the identical lobbyist $2.4 million in part to gain approval of the third rail. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joanne Desmond after Ron Puzinski.
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, I want to add some detail to what you just heard because there's ample evidence that the Amtrak stop and the third rail are connected in documents that the city actually has been able to provide. If you may remember, on November 7th of 2016, the number of you were here when the City Council unanimously adopted Resolution 2016-43, which states that the environmental assessment prepared for the third rail proposal, quote, has not presented clear and convincing evidence, unquote, and, quote, would have an adverse impact on the public health, safety, and welfare of its residents, end quote. Barely 3 months later, as you kind of heard, a contradictory resolution was drafted by our city manager in direct opposition to Resolution 2016-43. Mr. Kiley's proposed new resolution would in fact support the third rail. Specifically, his draft resolution includes the following language. On page 1, quote, whereas for the past 5 years, the city and businesses located in Lake County have been meeting with representatives of WisDOT, IDOT, Amtrak, and Metra to secure an Amtrak stop at the Lake Forest Telegraph Road Station, end quote. Then again on page 2, whereas Metra has recently acknowledged that it favors a third main rail on the Metra District North Line from Rondout to Chicago, end quote. And also on page 2, quote, whereas it is the conclusion of the corporate authorities that subject to the adoption of Rondout Alternative 2, as well as the modifications and stipulations as set forth below, that the proposed third main rail line to accommodate the expanded Hiawatha service as proposed in the project could be deemed reasonable and acceptable to the community. That link is pretty clear. Both those topics are covered in the same document. But what is most telling is that the Kiley resolution was quietly circulated to representatives of WisDOT, IDOT, Metra, Hanson Engineers, and Chambers, Conlin, and Hartwell, the lobbying firm, for comment as it was being drafted. An email from Mr. Kiley dated January 31st, 2017 was sent to that group with this message in bold. Quote, I would prefer that you keep this document confidential as it has not been circulated in Lake Forest, end quote. And I don't know if any members of the City Council saw it. There's no evidence that Mr. Kiley ever informed these agencies that in fact the City Council did not adopt this recommended resolution in spite of his repeated efforts to do so. So how can the city manager and mayor continue to state that the Amtrak stop and the third rail are not connected?
Joanne, and then Richard Shiger thereafter.
We believed you, we trusted you. We believed you when you said that no one supported the third siding rail to hold idling freight trains in our city. We believed you when you shared our concerns about the impact of the freight train yard EA proposal on public safety, air pollution from carcinogenic diesel fumes, damage to our natural resources, wetlands, and ecosystems, health impacts from noise, damage to property from vibrations, reduced property values and quality of life, effects on students in nearby schools, longer road closures, and limited accessibility of first responders. We believed you when you said that the Amtrak stop and the third rail were very separate issues and had nothing to do with each other. We believe that even though the city manager repeatedly claimed the city had no jurisdiction over the railroad, that you would use the considerable political influence that exists in our community to prevent the worst possible project ever proposed to irreversibly change the character and safety of our city. We trusted that you would be our advocates, that you as our elected officials would be a more powerful voice than your individual citizens to protect those that depend on your leadership. We trusted you. And now we are shocked and saddened that the city we love has, through the lies, deceit, and hypocrisy of its city manager and mayors, secretly worked to undermine the welfare and best interests of its residents. Any semblance of trust in the leadership of our local government has been destroyed. How can we possibly move forward?
Mr. Sugar? Next would be Rick Cusack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, members of the City Council. I'm here to express my pride in the city of Lake Forest, as all of these people in the audience are here to express their pride in the city. And we're here to talk about how to make the city better. it's a good thing that you hired Lee Jeter to conduct the investigation into the matters that need to be investigated. But I have to tell you, I think there's another examination that's in order. The Citizens for Action asked the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission to review the actions of Victor Filippini and the Filippini law firm in connection with retaining the Washington, D.C. lobbying firm of Chambers, Conlon, and Hartwell to represent the city of Lake Forest. Public records show that the Filippini law firm, who for many years has served as the Lake Forest city attorney, entered into agreements with the lobbying firm that you've heard about before. In addition, Mr. Filippini signed this agreement that called for a $9,500 per month retainer to be paid starting in February of 2016. The lobbying agreements were signed by Victor Filippini, not by the city of Lake Forest. Mr. Filippini knew that the city code required contracts involving payments in excess of $20,000 to be required to be approved by the city council. Yet, he continued this conduct. The lobbying agreement was never approved by the city council, never brought before it for discussion. Yet, beginning in February 2016, the monthly invoices for legal services to the city from the Filippini law firm included charges for lobbying fees, which Filippini billed the city for, collected the money, and passed the money on to the lobbying firm. By the time the council members first learned of the lobbying arrangements on November of 2017, the invoices, as you've heard, totaled $192,000, nearly 10 times the limit of the city manager's authority, absent city approval. We think this behavior is questionable and needs to be examined by the Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission. The city council and its citizens deserve to know if the attorney they rely upon has violated the Illinois rules of professional conduct issued by the Illinois Supreme Court, and whether Mr. Filippini is a reliable source of advice for the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Dennis.
No, Rick Cusack.
I'm just alerting folks. You're
Oh,
next.
beg your pardon.
Okay.
Is the clock on?
I can't read the writing. It's 1100 Sir William Lane. Okay.
I'd actually like to begin by pointing out that if the action group had not exposed the lobbying expense, this group would not be here tonight because there was no effort made to ever expose it. My issue, my quandary, is that I'm kind of mystified as to the process that is taken in order to put this into place. And I'd like to quote from an email from Mayor Lansing on August 9th, 2017. The city has no authority or jurisdiction over Amtrak, the Federal Railway Administration, WSDOT, nor IDOT. No unit of local government, including Lake Forest, has any authority over what trains Amtrak wishes to add or what track improvements are sought or the conduct of freight rail operations. Well, I find that interesting because at that time the mayor was fully aware of this lobbying agreement that had gone on for a full year and a half. So his statement in this email clearly is a misstatement, or he simply forgot, which seems to be endemic in the with the employees of Lake Forest. Secondly, I'd like to read another email in response from Alderman Tack in response to a question from a concerned citizen about the undisclosed lobbying payments. Alderman Tack of the 3rd Ward responded that, and I quote, "The lobbying effort was granted by Mayors Schoenheider and Lansing, with the concept approved by several councils. Lansing, Kylie, and Jack were CC'd on that email. His admission that the mayor's approved lobbying effort constitutes a clear violation of the city code requiring matters such as this to be approved by members of the city council, not the mayor. Alderman Tack claims that the scheme was approved by several councils. I have two questions for Alderman Tack. One, could he please provide me with the approval that was signed by Mayor Schoenheider and Lansing? And two, could he please identify the members of the council who were aware of and approved the lobbying scheme at this time, right now?
No.
Thank you. That's all. Thank you very much.
Last would be Lexus and Mark Blitzstein.
For the record, my name is Dennis Molmans. I live at 1100 Sir William Lane, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. I appreciate Alderman Beidler's initiating a discussion at the end of the December 4th meeting asking the City Council, what should we do to respond to the citizens and to increase transparency within the city government? While transparency is important, I would suggest to the City Council that the critical issue affecting the Citizens for Action and many Lake Forest residents is not transparency, but a lack of trust. Trust in the city government. Over the past years, I've observed several actions that have eroded this basic tenet of our city government. How can you ask the citizens to trust the city manager who in January 2017 first shared a draft resolution with WisDOT, IDOT, and Metra trading Lake Forest City Council support for the Hiawatha 3rd Rail Project in exchange for their support of the Amtrak stop, and then sharing that with the city for consideration, which you did not approve. Thank you. Trust a city manager and mayor who expended over $200,000 in city contingency funds without your knowledge and approval for lobbyists to get this damn Amtrak stop. Trust a city government who has worked for nearly 7 years to obtain the Amtrak approval to reconsider and eventually do the right thing. Amtrak is not a commuter rail service. It's too darn expensive. I've ridden it. This project has minimal economic justification for Lake Forest residents, will cost a small fortune of taxpayer funds, our funds, to finalize wherever you get them, and will add to the already congested Everett and Conway Road intersections by adding over 90 minutes of lane closures at these crossings each day, potentially affecting the responsiveness of city fire and safety units. How can you expect us to trust the City Council to make the right decisions for the long-term development of the city when, after receiving a petition with over 500 signatures opposing the waterworks development and hearing 18 individuals speak out against the project, and after Alderman Bushman articulated how the potential development did not meet but contradicted your very city guidelines used to evaluate whether a variance to existing zoning is warranted, despite all these facts, you still gave it the vote of approval. Trust is a basic tenet in our city government. Trust is incorporated in the mission statement of the city to promote a community spirit of trust, respect, and citizen involvement. As a city government largely controlled by the caucus, you have an added responsibility as elected officials to first think about the impact of your decisions to your citizens and individual homeowners in Lake Forest, and secondarily to consider the effect on business development. Until you consistently exhibit by your actions decisions that are detrimental to the will of the individual citizens, you will not gain that basic trust. Thank you.
Lexus and Mark Blitzstein. Thank you. In part, a response to these comments, in part to provide some background and perspective that I think's been lost, I'd like to make the following comments. Lake Forest City Council has a long history of problem-solving and decision-making, utilizing a thorough process that includes public input and engagement. I would like to thank all who have offered their opinions and information to City Council over the past few months on West Lake Forest rail matters. By working together, better decisions are always made. At all times, it is imperative the City Council's position on an Amtrak stop at Telegraph Road be clear to all, as well as matters affecting the Milwaukee District North Line, including a possible third track. Lest there be confusion in the community about these matters, I would like to state the following. This City Council, as with past City Council, supports an Amtrak stop at the Telegraph Road station. Of utmost importance to Lake Forest is the impact the stop has on public safety. This stop will slow and stop all Amtrak trains traversing our community, thereby providing safety enhancement, including at traffic intersections. An additional benefit to adding a stop is that it will provide an important transportation service to many Lake Forest citizens and commuters, as well as large employers and small businesses within the area. This new stop will provide easy and efficient access for residents and employees traveling to and from Chicago and to the ever-growing Milwaukee and southeast Wisconsin business opportunities. The Council is pleased that after 8 years of pursuing such a stop, that Amtrak, the Illinois Department of Transportation, Metra, and the Wisconsin Department of Transportation all have agreed to the city's long-pursued request. Number 2, this City Council, as with past City Councils, also supports the construction of a pedestrian underpass at the Telegraph Road station. Once again, for the public health and safety of our residents, we need to see this project become a reality. Lake Forest has experienced far too many track crossing deaths over the years, and we need to take steps to make this station safer. In 2018, we will work hard to finalize the engineering and raise the necessary external funding to complete this project. We are working to secure federal funding and are pursuing other outside sources of funding to support this important community safety enhancement that Amtrak also requires. Number 3, this City Council, as with past City Councils, supports the general enhancement of commuter rail service within our community. Many residents rely on Metra service to get to and from work, visit Chicago, and travel to other communities. The availability of convenient and timely commuter and local rail service is vital to Lake Forest's long-term well-being. These initiatives have been goals for the city since 2010 and have been part of the Lake Forest strategic plan. Obviously, for these goals to be achieved, the city has and will continue to work with Metra, Amtrak, IDOT, and WISDOT. Let us not forget that Metra alone owns the Milwaukee District North Line and must authorize any new stops, construction, or passenger service within their right-of-way. Now, on an entirely separate matter that has never been connected to the foregoing in all of my experience, prior to becoming mayor and since I've been mayor. With regard to the Milwaukee District third track, this City Council has not supported the construction of a third track as proposed in the draft environmental assessment. Following the release of the draft environmental assessment in late 2016, the City Council did approve a resolution raising many questions, which prompted more analysis of potential noise and vibration impacts on surrounding properties. The Council is concerned about the impacts to our community and residents. I do not believe that any member of this City Council believes a third track through our community enhances the quality of life. To that end, city representatives have met with Metro officials to persuade them, to try and influence them, to explore alternative steps to achieve their desired operational flexibility. This work and direction is evidenced in Metro's recent Tiger Grant application, which does not include a funding request for a third track. As frustrating as it may be for some, city officials and residents must wait until the final environmental assessment is released to decide the city council's next course of action. These actions could include engaging outside consultants, but that cannot happen until the report is released and we know the conditions and a reasonable course of action can be decided upon. We anticipate the report to be released in the next few months. Be assured the City Council will share the report and hold a public meeting to discuss it and the defined recommendations that are made. Only with the specific data of the environmental assessment in hand can we explore the best next steps. Once again, I thank our residents for their interest and their patience in working through this complex issue. To make this community effort successful, we must work together patiently to be effective. By following our long-standing tradition of thoughtful problem-solving and community collaboration, I am confident we will reach the best solution. This tradition has served Lake Forest well for many decades and will continue to be a hallmark of Lake Forest city government. Thank you. Next item of business is items for omnibus vote consideration. We have 5 tonight. The first is the approval of the December 18th, 2017 City Council meeting minutes. Number 2 is the check register for the period of December 2nd, 2017 to January 5th, 2018. Third, special event approval of the recurring Class A special event permits proposed for 2018. Approval of additional funding to Gewalt Hamilton Associates Incorporated for engineering services related to the Central Business District train station renovation project in an amount of $4,711.70. 5, consideration of a recommendation from the Zoning Board of Appeals in support of an amendment to a special use permit for the Knollwood Club approving modifications to the previously approved site plan. This is a first reading, and if desired by council, a final approval. Any comments, questions? As before, we can withdraw any item for separate consideration.
Gentlemen, take the conversation outside.
Yeah. I might ask that conversations be taken outside if, so we can conduct business. Thank you. Any questions? Fairly straightforward. In that case, I'll ask for a motion to approve the 5 omnibus items as presented.
So moved.
Second.
This is a roll call vote.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
7 yeas, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. Next is ordinances, first is the consideration of a recommendation from the Plan Commission in support of a special use permit authorizing a bank and drive-through facility for Chase Bank, and consideration of a recommendation from the Building Review Board in support of design aspects of the development proposed at 884 South Waukegan Road. And if the council wishes to, we could waive first reading and grant final approval. This will be presented by Catherine Zerniak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I know you have been sitting there for a long time. I will try and be brief, but both the Plan Commission and Building Review Board did spend a considerable amount of time on this, so I ask for your patience, even though I will try and be brief. This matter does come to you as a recommendation from both the Plan Commission and Building Review Board. The Plan Commission began its consideration of this matter in August of this year. An overview on what I'd like to address this evening. I'd like to review the Board and Commission recommendations, give a brief description of the project, provide some background on the issues, review the special use permit standards upon which this request must be considered, speak to some of the features of the project, what the city gains, what the project is and what the project is not, and again, end with a simple review of the recommendations. As I mentioned, the Plan Commission began its consideration of this matter in August. They considered it in August and September. At those meetings, they really focused on understanding the special use criteria, understanding the B1 zoning district, and then they, at the end of the September meeting, really felt like because of the specific evaluation criteria for special use permits, then having Building Review Board review was important before the Plan Commission made its final recommendation. Building Review Board considered this matter in November, recommended approval 6-0, and then this matter went back to the Plan Commission in December, and they also voted 6-0 in support of approval of the project. Just as a quick background, I'm sure most people know Chase Bank is proposed to be located where McDonald's used to be located. The building is still there. It is located on the west side of Waukegan Road, access from Gloucester Crossing, and it is located just south of Forest Square development and across the street from Sunset. Just a quick overview of the project. The proposed Chase Bank building is proposed to replace the McDonald's building. The McDonald's building would be demolished. The Chase Bank would generally be in the same footprint as the McDonald's building. Chase Bank building is fairly small as bank buildings in comparison to bank buildings of the past. The building is proposed as a 3,600 square foot bank. The existing ingress and egress to the site will remain. There is a right-in from southbound Waukegan Road. There is a right out onto southbound Waukegan Road. There are two accesses to the site from Gloucester Crossing, and the access through to Forest Square to the north would remain as part of this project. The amount of green space on the site is increased from what exists today on the McDonald's site. In addition, and I'll speak to this more in a moment, but pedestrian pathways have been added directly in response to criteria in the code for special uses. Just to step back, I did mention that the Plan Commission, particularly at its August and September meeting, acknowledged essentially the elephant in the room. No one wants any more banks. And they asked the question, does our comprehensive plan, does our zoning code allow the city to simply say, close the door, we have enough banks, go away? And the Plan Commission, after much deliberation, came to the conclusion that, in fact, the proposal for the bank must be reviewed based on the special use criteria in the code. They looked at the comprehensive plan language for the Settler Square area. Comprehensive plan, as you heard the city manager say, is about 20 years old. Although some portions of the comprehensive plan have been updated, the Settler Square element has not been updated and really was crafted at the time the TIF district was in place for this area. Specifically, the comprehensive plan talks about encouraging unified development in this area, buildings that relate to each other as opposed to buildings that are just incrementally developed. The comprehensive plan speaks to high-quality development, strong design, strong materials, not just settling for whatever someone brings forward. The comprehensive plan also speaks to helping to create an identity for this area and to create vitality through a mix of uses. The B1 district speaks to uses, commercial and commercial, including retail and service businesses that respond to needs for residents in the general area. The commission had a significant discussion about whether banks, in fact, are a frequent and recurring need for residents. In the end, they looked at that district and recognized currently the area has 3 banks, and prior to 2012, this area had 4 banks before Northern Trust relocated and Lake Forest Bank and Trust moved over to their space. The Lake Forest Bank and Trust space today remains vacant since 2012. The Plan Commission also talked about McDonald's, and it was not, the irony of the McDonald's situation was not lost on the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission acknowledged that just over 20 years ago, a Plan Commission recommended approval of a special use permit to allow a McDonald's, a very high quality design with no drive-through. They forwarded that recommendation to the City Council. The City Council denied that request for a special use permit. The McDonald's was built anyway, and in fact, the Plan Commission heard testimony that lamented the demise of McDonald's that was so strongly opposed in the past. So again, the Plan Commission didn't just look at this from surface issues. They really did their due diligence and studied this issue and really questioned how they should be reviewing it. The Plan Commission also talked about Forest Square. Although the Plan Commission didn't get into a deep discussion about Forest Square, I have received some questions about Forest Square. So just to clarify, Forest Square was approved as the redevelopment of the site to the north of what until recently was McDonald's. The developer of Forest Square came to the city and said, I don't want to be in a position of coming back to the city every time I want to do a use that's considered a special use on the first floor. So at the developer's request, the City Council, the Plan Commission, and then the City Council considered a request to approve that development with approval of certain special uses that would be allowed without further review on the first floor. Included in those uses, a bank was not included in those uses. In fact, the ordinance says that if a bank is proposed for Forest Square, a bank would need to come back through its own separate special use process. So it was considered at the time whether a bank should be permitted in Forest Square, but the developer didn't proceed with that issue. They instead wanted to have other special uses, such as the opportunity to have a catering facility, for instance. A catering facility is considered a special use in the B1 district. And then finally, in response to the question about we don't want any banks, can we say no to banks? In fact, the City Council considered that in 2003. In 2003, I believe it was in response to a proposal that was not yet before the city, but the council knew it was likely to come forward, was a request for the site on the southwest corner of Wisconsin and Western to be redeveloped with Bank of America. That was a ways off. The City Council proactively established a moratorium for a 90-day period to allow reconsideration of the appropriateness of non-retail uses in business districts. And in looking back in some documentation from that time, the key concerns that led to the establishment of that moratorium was what is the right mix of retail and non-retail uses? How should non-retail and retail uses be located in relation to each other? It was in response to a perceived community need, and certainly a desire for more retail uses. But importantly, the moratorium was established in part to assure that there were the tools in the city code to be able to push developers of non-retail uses, including a bank, to develop at a higher level. The idea was that we didn't want just any branch bank coming in. So quality of the development, the ability to have amenities or additive uses as part of any future non-retail uses, considering the impact on infrastructure, specifically how drive-throughs were located and whether they would intersect a major thoroughfare or whether they were contained on the site, and certainly consideration of the loss of sales tax revenue. So in looking at what drove those concerns, that moratorium, those concerns then led to the standards which the Plan Commission used over the last 4 months to evaluate the Chase Bank request that is now before you. You have findings that are detailed in your ordinance, but just in summary, the standards require a determination that the use not be detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the public. The standards require that the use not be injurious to other properties, not diminish property values, not impede development of surrounding properties, not negatively impact the character of the area, that adequate utilities and adequate ingress and egress be available to serve the use, and as a direct result of the moratorium in 2003, that the use enhances pedestrian pathways, really serves to encourage cross-traffic between uses, and by doing so increase the vitality of business districts, and importantly, to be designed, constructed, and configured in a way that supports future adaptive reuse, specifically to avoid the situation where a bank is constructed and just visually it always reads as a bank. Certainly this works successfully with Bank of America. As you look at that building, you can see storefronts, you could see a potential restaurant, multi-tenants. So those were key aspects that were added as a result of the moratorium. As both the Plan Commission and Building Review Board went through their deliberations, in the end, although the building that was first presented to the Plan Commission in August looked much different than what's presented to you tonight, the Building Review Board and Plan Commission commended the project for the high-quality design, for the high-quality materials, and importantly, for the consistency of the design, massing, and materials with Forest Square to the north. In fact, Chase Bank reached out to the architect for that project, worked closely with the owners of Forest Square in developing the modified design. The Plan Commission found that the project was compatible and in fact achieved that unified design that the comprehensive plan talks about. The building, as it's currently configured, is adaptable for future tenants. In fact, the petitioners demonstrated that the design of the building has 4 fronts. It also would allow for punched openings on all 4 sides. It would allow for a multi-tenant. The building is designed in a 2-story form, as suggested in the comprehensive plan, despite the fact that the bank simply needs the first floor. This building could, in the future, be configured with a second floor to create offices, to bring more employees into the area. Chase Bank, as the Plan Commission acknowledged, is a national bank. It's different than the regional and local banks in the area. And national banks, based on statistics, meet a different need, and in fact, based on traffic counts that were presented, do demonstrate a higher traffic activity than the local and regional banks in the area. As proposed by Chase Bank, this particular development does represent a significant investment into the West Lake Forest Business District. It would provide a long-term stable tenant in an area that has seen vacancies and spaces that have been difficult to fill and difficult to keep filled. And you did receive a letter from the property owners with an offer to provide financial assistance, as was done when North Shore University Healthcare Systems moved into Levels, to really help provide maintenance infrastructure in the area, to support maintenance infrastructure in the area, and to enhance landscaping, streetscapes. So those are the design aspects of the project, except for that last one. To review the elevations of the building, again, these were reviewed by the Building Review Board, also by the Plan Commission. Strong building design. This is the north elevation, high-quality materials. If you envision this as something other than the bank, it is fairly easy to do. This is the east side. Again, the building is four-sided with four fronts on all four sides, so a front will also face the railroad tracks. This will be the side facing Waukegan Road, responding to the comprehensive plan's direction to bring buildings forward and to provide some building mass on the streetscape. As required by one of the conditions in the code, one of the criteria, Chase Bank provided a plan for significant enhancements to pedestrian connections, not just on the site to some of the open areas that would be provided, but to provide enhanced pedestrian connections from the existing public sidewalk along the west side of Waukegan Road, adding a sidewalk between the bank lot and Forest Square, providing pedestrian connections. At the direction of the Plan Commission, the drive-through was narrowed to provide access to the stairs that currently provide access to the train station, and also pedestrian improvements were added to provide a stronger connection to the crossing that leads to Sunset. You had in your packet a letter from Mr. Cortese, the owner of Sunset, who spoke to the importance of bringing employees into the area who would go to Sunset for lunch or stop by after dinner or after work. So the pedestrian enhancements called out as a criteria in the code are specifically provided in the plan recommended to you by the Plan Commission. As I mentioned, increased landscape areas are provided for public access. There is a courtyard, benches, seating area. The trash, which formerly was located in this area, has been relocated up against the railroad right-of-way, again, to provide to encourage walkability, to encourage connections, to encourage employees of Chase to patronize businesses located next door. Again, National Bank, bank services, the focus isn't necessarily on tellers. This is primarily a wealth management office, so generates a different type of traffic. This proposed bank location does fill a gap in the Chase Bank service area. The Plan Commission pushed hard on this question and was provided with data from Chase that actually illustrated that there is a gap in this area for Chase Bank. Again, a significant investment, and I already reviewed those. And just finally, I will note, this is a chart, a graphic that identifies locations of other Chase Banks in the area. This is the Chase Bank that exists on Western and Illinois Road. This is the area proposed for a Chase Bank. It is an area, unlike neighboring communities where there are more Chase Bank branches, this is an area where there is a gap in the service territory covered by Chase, which is a different type of a bank than is currently located along Waukegan Road. And I will close by just reiterating, this comes to you with the recommendation both from the Plan Commission and the Building Review Board. Those votes were 6-0. And if you choose to do so, it will be appropriate to waive first reading and grant final approval. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Kathy, back at the beginning of your discussion or your presentation, you mentioned that City Council denied McDonald's, and then you said McDonald's went ahead. How did that come about?
McDonald's proceeded as a result of litigation. So some of the conditions that the Plan Commission recommended Some of the design enhancements that were recommended by the Plan Commission were lost through that process.
So there was a lawsuit, and then, what, the court decided that, or there was a settlement, or, I just don't remember the history.
I wasn't here. I will let...
Well, I'll try and put a sharper point on it so there's no misunderstanding, I guess. The city council, by a vote of 5-4, turned down the McDonald's petition. McDonald's sued. They had been instructed by the city attorney that the underlying zoning would permit the use, and therefore had recommended that the council not turn it down. We used outside counsel. We spent $400,000 on outside counsel, and a court ruled against the city of Lake Forest. And as Kathy said, in the course of that, some of the conditions that we had negotiated as a part of the Plan Commission approval that were before the city council were no longer on the table and not enforced by the court. The most notable one was we had negotiated that there would be no drive-through facility, and after we went to court, basically, the developer said, well, because of the cost associated with fighting this litigation, I now need the drive-through facility to help pay for the costs. So that was sort of what happened 20 years ago on the same site.
What was the underlying zoning 20 years ago on that site?
At that time, all of the city's business districts were zoned B2. There was a single commercial district.
Right. And was the comprehensive plan, did it state the same parameters that we have in the comprehensive plan today?
I don't remember the exact timing. The comprehensive plan, I believe, was last fully updated in 1998, so I think they were fairly concurrent.
I thought it was more recently than that, at least it was amended, was it not?
But not in, she just said not in this district.
Not in this? Okay. All right, but this B1 business district came in after the McDonald's came in, partially perhaps to address some of those concerns.
It did. There was a single business district at that time.
I have a couple of questions and
But
concerns.
if I could just one follow-up, maybe the city attorney can help. I mean, is the legal framework of the decision for tonight still extant? I mean, is this the same sets of issues here about the city's processes here, the advisory boards, the commissions to council, how that process is taking place, how these special use permit process works, and the underlying property rights of the zoning, all that's still in place? Is there any material difference from what was going on at the time of McDonald's?
I believe, and I was not city attorney at the time, I believe that the zoning is essentially the same in terms of, excuse me, in terms of the procedures. As Kathy mentioned, the districts themselves have changed, but the zoning for special use permits is substantially the same. One significant difference has occurred, and that is several years after the McDonald's case, the Illinois Supreme Court made a couplet of decisions which resulted in a change in the character of special use permits, involving an ordinance very similar to how the city's ordinance is crafted. The Supreme Court changed the nature of what special use permits were from a legislative decision to a quasi-judicial decision. And in doing that, the court said, now I'm going to read this because it's significant as to how they phrased it. A special use is a type of property use that is expressly permitted within a zoning district by the controlling zoning ordinance, so long as the use meets certain criteria or conditions. And we have in our code, as we did back at the time of McDonald's, a series of standards, and they are outlined in Kathy's presentation, and they're set forth in our zoning code, looking at a series of impacts, whether there are adverse impacts on several different levels. So those are the standards by which decisions are to be made. The key difference, because of the cases that the Illinois Supreme Court decided, is that those determinations are now not matters within the pure legislative discretion of the city council, but rather are quasi-judicial in nature. I will note that the Illinois Municipal Code zoning provisions were changed with respect to how special use permits are reviewed by courts, but that didn't affect in any way the nature of the special use permit process as determined by the Illinois Supreme Court. I know that sounds a lot of legal mumbo jumbo, but what it means is that in short order, a special use permit is essentially allowed if it's recognized in the zoning code as a special use permit, except that it has to meet special criteria. And those are the criteria that the Plan Commission has reviewed.
Has been utilizing, yeah, in effect, yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
I have a couple of comments. One, we have apparently in front of us received tonight a very elaborate and detailed set of comments from Alderman Bushman, who is the alderman for the ward that this is in. Expressing his regret at not being able to be here tonight, I believe he may have asked that this discussion be postponed. If we
Can I just interrupt, just procedurally here? Alderman Bushman is not here. He asked that Alderman Marino read his statement, which
all right.
I'm
So that's gonna
amenable to.
happen.
So I thought you had a question.
No,
about
I
something
do.
else.
I do.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
give me a break here. It's already been a long night, and we got a lot more to come. If we do just the first reading tonight, then will this mean that it'll come up again at a meeting that Alderman Bushman will be present at? I guess that's where I'm going with this. So if we decide on just doing first reading, okay.
What was the answer to that question?
I think the answer is yes.
I'm assuming.
My understanding is Alderman Bushman will be here for your February 5th meeting,
Right.
so.
So that would be when this would come up for final reading.
Correct.
I will
So
say
then-
he will be groggy, because he will have just landed.
So
But
are
he'll
you,
be here.
are you arguing for us to make the decision tonight? And
I am not.
In almost every circumstance, I would rather have an informed and groggy Ray than no Ray, especially on something that he's given so much
If
time.
I might note, and I'm not going to make any comment as to the grogginess or not of Alderman Bushman, if you have a first reading tonight, when it's placed back on the agenda, it's not necessary that it be at the February 5th meeting. It can be at a subsequent meeting, but the action of a first reading simply means that there's still a subsequent action necessary to conclude your review.
And there would be a discussion as part of that.
That's
subsequent-
correct.
Okay. So,
Just relevant on that point, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there has been some calendaring challenges.
Okay. No, I understand
And we
that.
have, for both February meetings, it being winter in Chicago, 2 aldermen missing from each
I
of
realize
the February meetings. So
I'm
that's
not-
another
I'm not here at one of them.
thought.
I am happy to make a couple of comments on this tonight. I would prefer that we have Ray present for a final vote. And I will try to really be quick. My favorite voting for something is when I'm excited by it, where I think it really is going to do something to enhance a community, or I think it's a good solution to something that I had seen as problematic and other people had seen as problematic for a while. And unfortunately, this doesn't meet those criteria for me. I thought McDonald's was a pretty swell gathering place. People of a number of ages were there. I know there were men's groups that came in for coffee. Mom stopped by. I myself guilty pleasured on quite a number of occasions in various ways, and I spend a fair amount of time over there. So not just at McDonald's, but in that whole neck of the woods, and it makes me feel sad that kind of gathering place is gone. Now I recognize a bank is not going to provide that function. It is simply not going to provide that function. If it meets our criteria, I certainly don't want us to be sued again, especially for this same site. I mean, the karma on that is really bad. But it does say to me that if this is the only part of town where we haven't really done a good job of revisiting the comprehensive plan, it's time to do that. And we may not be able to do it right this minute, but we certainly need to do it sooner rather than later, because I think that's really an issue. And finally, I mean, I have an account at Chase. I was in there today on the other side of town paying my credit card bill, which I often do to save a stamp. I am concerned that in the letter we got, in some of the documentation, Chase maintains that it's an incredibly strong commitment to community. I am not aware of Chase being a big contributor to our local community. Now, I could be wrong, but I do fundraising in this community, and Chase is not usually leading the list of organizations. That's the trouble with these national groups. They don't have the same engagement locally. We have a couple of phenomenal local banks, one in particular, but that support everything. This is not one of those. So I would actually say if Chase wants us to be, moderately happy about this facility, I'd love to see some commitment specified up front, not just to Lake County, but to Lake Forest, and maybe some of those activities that we're talking about doing out there. But I'm not, I'd love to find a way to be happier about this than I am, even if we essentially have to do it because it's legal.
I'll go.
Alderman Marino. Please.
Thank you.
I think it'd be appropriate.
If I may, I would like to read the prepared statement of Alderman Bushman for the January 16, 2018 City Council meeting. He did shorten it at my request. It's a page and a half, and it's
That's impossible.
kind of
for Ray to
small
do.
print, but I'm going to do my best. And I will.
Are we done with asking questions of Kathy, and we're now going around? I'm confused as to where we are in this process.
Why don't we, Kathy's still standing. You're right, Kathy.
Some of the questions may reference back to her.
Yeah.
I don't have any questions
So,
for Kathy.
are there any questions of Kathy?
I have another question.
Good point, thank you.
It seems to me that when I was listening to the Plan Commission meeting on this, and you and I discussed this also, that there was a little bit of concern about the size of this building, that it's quite small. Yet, this is a rather large piece of property. So it seems to me it could accommodate a larger building, but for the drive-through lanes that we have around this. But going back to the adaptive reuse, I thought that the Plan Commission was saying that it might be a little difficult to reuse it because of the size of it, and that at the most it might accommodate one retailer. And so can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Actually, for a commercial site, the site isn't very large. The site used to be larger because it extended to the south, so the site is fairly narrow. Certainly a larger building could be accommodated, but then you have the trade-off, particularly if you have a restaurant use, if you have a retail use, then you have a higher demand for parking. So the Plan Commission, they actually had both discussions. They talked about, well, the building could be bigger, but they also talked about increase the green space.
But wait, what happened to the south? You were saying the site used to be larger to the south?
As part of the tax increment financing district, a portion of this property was actually dedicated for public right-of-way as to achieve the plan that was established for the Settler Square area.
Where the turnaround, where the cul-de-sac, if you will, is, that used to be privately owned, and the city, as a part of the TIF redevelopment district, purchased part of the property so that the intersection could be constructed.
And I think the boulevard, the median in the middle there, was a specific goal of the TIF district, and that led to narrowing of this property. But you're correct, the Plan Commission talked about, would a larger building be better, or would more green space be better? They did look at this building. The Building Review Board also looked at this building. Certainly, it could accommodate more than one if the tenants were small. It really depends on the use. It could be a multi-use building in the future. As I mentioned, it is designed in a way that there could be punched openings, entrances on essentially all four sides. So it really would depend on what the business was. If it was one or two small boutiques, if it was a small cafe, but the building itself is designed in a way that really lends itself to be seen as part of a unified development with Forest Square to the north. So both the Building Review Board and Plan Commission found the building to actually lend itself quite well to future adaptive reuse.
Any other questions?
I think she was going to.
I'm ready to read.
Okay, Kathy.
Prepared statement of Alderman Bushman for January 16, 2018 City Council meeting. Sorry I am not able to attend this meeting. I did want to participate in the council's deliberations on this petition, which has a direct impact on my ward. But my request to postpone it to the next council meeting was not granted. So let me offer my comments to my fellow aldermen with this written summary. And I thank you on his behalf for considering a first reading and postponing the vote. The council is being asked to consider a request for a special use permit for a bank or a McDonald's used to operate. To be clear, a bank in this B1 neighborhood business district is not a permitted use as defined in our zoning code, nor is it considered similar and compatible with the listed permitted uses under our code. Rather, it is separately categorized as a special use, which is defined in our zoning code as a use which cannot be properly classified as a permitted use because of its unique characteristics. I'd like to address two issues, the principle and the precedent. Both arise because we are dealing with a unique set of facts. The McDonald's operated on the site since 1997 under a 20-year lease. The franchisee and operator of the McDonald's has owned and operated as many as 47 McDonald's and continues to operate more than 20, with this one being special in his hometown. He sought to renew his 20-year lease and planned improvements and remodeling. He had a tentative verbal agreement on the rent, but a new written lease never materialized. The property owner apparently received an offer from Chase Bank for reportedly twice the rent tentatively agreed to. McDonald's could not match it and was forced out. The loss of the McDonald's is the loss of a retail business that served the neighborhood, served the families with young children, served the teenagers and young adults, served those working in the area wanting a quick and inexpensive breakfast lunch, served the senior citizens as a daily meeting place, served those wanting just a cup of coffee or just a dessert or a shake. Fair to say, it served the neighborhood in an unusually broad, cosmopolitan, neighborly way. It contributed significantly to the concept of a neighborhood business district, something another branch bank simply does not do. Another bank does not come close to contributing like the McDonald's to the frequently recurring needs of persons residing in adjacent or nearby residential areas, which is the very stated purpose of this B1 district. Don't we have an important principle here? The city of Lake Forest has always prided itself on its land use planning. Developments should never be allowed simply based on what generates the most money for the property owner. This is the antithesis of good city planning. Rather, proposed changes in use should be carefully examined, particularly in this case in terms of what is being lost versus what is being gained. And if what is being lost is much better for the community and the district, should there not be a pushback? Discourage the change and certainly not condone it? Excuse me. Otherwise, does it not become simply a bidding war, with the casualty being what is better for the neighborhood and the shopping district? Now let me say a few words about the precedent. The city has historically been sensitive to our shopping districts losing the retail nature of the district to the financial and banking businesses. Limitations have been imposed on our East shopping district. Not sure why the same limitations for the same reasons should not apply to the West shopping district. But in any event, the City Council in 2003 examined this problem and passed without dissent Ordinance number 03.40. The council found that the appropriate balance of retail and non-retail uses together create a synergistic environment that promotes healthy business districts, maintains property values, and retains and attracts a variety of businesses. Furthermore, a preponderance of any single business or use in the business district's limits opportunities for additive uses and threatens to impact both the vitality of the district and the fundamental character of the commercial areas in the community. In other words, the City Council was clear in wanting for Settler Square and Forest Square an appropriate balance of uses, a healthy, synergistic business environment, and not a preponderance of a single business or use. One step to achieve that objective was making clear that banks and other financial institutions were no longer to be considered permitted uses, so we do not negatively affect the overall character of the area and detract from the primary retail nature of the district. Don't we still stand for not wanting a preponderance of any one type of business, Doesn't the City Council of 2018 still want what the City Council in 2003 wanted? Let us respect the precedent. In conclusion, I recognize I'm not in attendance to vote, but in light of my concerns, I would support a motion to deny the SUP. I'd also support a motion to postpone action so that I can participate in the council's deliberations since it directly impacts my ward, and also would support a multidisciplined effort to revisit the overall planning for our West Side shopping district and to take steps to improve upon this community-oriented shopping district before it is too late. Sincerely, Ray Bushman. Thank you.
May I?
Jack?
A bank was never anticipated in this area. McDonald's or any other similarly supporting business would clearly be more desirable. Instead, we have Chase Bank before us this evening because they were the highest bidder on the property. In my estimation, good land use planning should never be for sale, nor should it be the driver for community development. Looking at compatibility, another bank is not synergistic to a healthy neighborhood business district. A bank does not add to the primary retail nature of the district. In my estimation, this is a wasted opportunity and is negative, not additive to the district. And quite frankly, I can't support it. Nor am I going to be intimidated by a lawsuit. Especially, I'm not going to say that. I will not be intimidated by a lawsuit.
Can we, what would take to have a motion to do this the first reading? I think that makes sense, but I'd like to have Ray here as long as it's in his word.
Are you making a motion?
Well, I don't know what the procedure is.
Well, no, you
We're trying to figure out how
can
you
make
do
a
that.
motion at any time, and then we'll see if there's a second, and then we'll have a vote.
Well, I would like to move that we make this a first reading, to enable Alderman Bushman and Alderman Marino to be at the same time, talk about this and have this discussion.
I'll second that.
Can I make a comment?
Please.
I think that's fine. I think if we're going to do that, though, I think we should make an effort to only have this come up to a vote when everybody's here. I don't particularly think that Alderman Bushman is any more important than Alderman Marino, than Alderman Reisenberg, or you. Probably more than me, but in looking at what's coming up, we have an entire month where every city council meeting is going to be missing one or two people, and I don't see that as being any better situation than what we have right now. So I'm all for just doing this as a first reading, but when it comes up for second reading, I would like to have that at a meeting where we know that all aldermen are going to be present.
Would you amend your motion to this?
I would amend my motion that the first available council meeting where we're all
May not be delayed.
Oh, I would second that again.
Okay, is this a roll call or a?
First reading is a voice vote, and just for clarification, however you vote on first reading has no binding effect on how you ultimately vote on the substance of the ordinance. So if you are for it, you can vote against it, and vice versa.
So are we voting on this being first reading, or are we voting on actually this?
The motion is for first reading, which would simply allow it to continue to a future meeting where a final consideration could be had.
Is there anything worthwhile in trying in the interim to clarify what is a permitted use?
May I make a suggestion? The city council has a legal committee. And in the legal committee was actually put in place by former Mayor Rummel for the purposes of keeping you out of litigation. There are 7 members, and Alderman Rummel is the liaison along with Mayor Lansing to the legal committee. And as I think the mayor indicated, you don't have a meeting in February where everybody will be here, so it probably, well, the second meeting of March, I think, is the next meeting, because you have the budget meeting at the first meeting in March, when I think you might have everybody in attendance. But in the interim, I know the legal committee has a meeting scheduled for February, and we could ask the legal committee to review this and to provide guidance to the city council, because I guess my only recommendation is if you're going to go into it with your eyes wide open, is to know exactly what, the potential outcome might be.
Well, I would certainly appreciate more clarity, because this whole issue hinges on whether or not this is a permitted use, and to me, property law is pretty black and white, and we get bogged down in these subjective issues, which I think is what gets us in trouble. So I would appreciate a lot more clarity on special use permits and permitted uses.
Okay. I'm assuming that's the consensus of the council, and I should give the legal committee direction?
Yeah, we have a pending motion. Let's come back to that. So,
Yeah, I think
this is a first reading. This would be a vote on a first reading of the ordinance.
With the provision that will be sent to the legal committee for their review and input, return to the city council at the first full council meeting.
Where everybody
everyone's
can be here.
present.
Members are there.
Okay.
And I would again second that. I think I know what we're doing.
Got that second in? Okay. This is
A voice vote is.
a voice vote. All
Mayor?
those,
Mr. Mayor, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I don't mean to cut off,
Yeah.
but you haven't allowed for any public comment if you want to
oh
take
my
it.
gosh, but you're right, I'm sorry, the first reading thing put me off, yes. So, with the pendency of this motion, is there any comment from the audience, from the public, from the petitioner on this matter? All right, thank you. Returning it back to the council. It's a voice vote. All right. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
It passes 6-1. So it's passed first reading with the legal committee and full attendance provisions attached thereto. And I think that concludes the matter for tonight.
No, there's one new business
There's
item.
not.
Not even close.
I wish.
What? On this
Item
side,
seven.
said this side.
We don't really have to talk about later.
Mr. Mayor, actually, there's, and you may just want to defer it, but we also had the BRB ordinance before you. You may want to continue that to the next meeting.
Yeah, well, no, I just was talking about the prior
Okay.
matter. Don't worry, we have a lot left. Okay. All right, new business.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I will be a pest on this one.
Okay, please.
The agenda did have two items on the chase. One was the special use permit.
Yeah.
The other one was the BRB. My recommendation would be that we continue the BRB discussion generally until that next city council meeting where the special use permit comes up. My guess is that that will be the tail that follows the dog.
Oh, I see your point, yeah, okay. So, is there a motion to waive first reading of an ordinance?
I would, if I'm going to be a real pain in your
What you're-
hindquarters along with that tail, but I would suggest that the motion be to simply continue the BRB ordinance consideration until the special use permit comes back for second reading.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
I don't really know.
Confused.
Somehow you lost me, and and I'm not sure I care at this point.
Past
so.
your bedtime.
Well, we're heading into the arms of the lawyers.
Yeah, right.
So often happens when confusion reigns. All right, there are, under new business, we turn now to new business. Everybody okay with that? And we have two reports. The hour being what it is, Mr. City Manager, and having had the eminent city staff stay here this long, I'd like to do the first one. I'm not sure the second one, although I was assured by Mr. Myers that this would be a short report. So,
We can ask both of our presenters to be very short.
okay.
So, Mr. Els?
Terse.
Yes, sir, I can do that. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I'm here this evening to provide a brief update and overview on the Waukegan-Everett intersection improvement project. Most of the information I'm going to present is included in the two-page memorandum in your packet. The accompanying aerial maps that are going to be up on the screen apparently did not make it in your packet, but I did put copies at your seats before the meeting because I know trying to see much detail on here is going to be tough. So, the Waukegan-Everett Intersection Improvement Project. This effort started back in 2009 when staff was directed to evaluate the existing traffic conditions in that area, along with possible impacts of a proposed residential development at the northwest corner of Everett and Telegraph. So the city hired a traffic engineering firm. They did some studies. They presented that information and some options to improve traffic flow to city council. This was back in 2009 into 2010. Ultimately, the proposed residential development did not come to fruition, but council requested that staff continue on with moving towards a project to improve traffic flow at that intersection. To that end, staff had the consultant initiate and complete a Phase 1 design for improvements at that intersection, and basically what they used for that was a list of priority recommendations from City Council. And those options, or the recommendations that council wanted to see, were extend the eastbound right turn lane on Everett Road to southbound Waukegan, addition of a northbound right turn lane on Telegraph Road to eastbound Everett, addition of a southbound right turn lane on Waukegan Road to westbound Everett Road, and modify the Waukegan and Everett intersection signal timing. It's important to note the number 2, the northbound right turn lane on Telegraph to eastbound Everett, that work was done years ago under a separate project, a standalone project, so that effort has been completed, and the signal timing changes through the state were done. So the Phase 1 design was completed by the consultant. It was presented to council, approved by council, based on it. Basically, the project was all of those 5 recommendations that council wanted to see. That's what made up the basis of the Phase 1 design. The design was submitted to the State Department of Transportation for their approval. That was granted. It was also sent to Metra because of the rail crossing there for their concurrence, and they, along with the ICC, approved the information in that Phase 1 design. Unfortunately, since then, for the last 4 to 5 years, that project has languished with the approval of the Phase 1 for lack of funding for Phase 2 design and construction. So fast forward to I believe it was around November of this year, this project is now eligible for Federal Surface Transportation Program funding through the Lake County Council of Mayors. They have a pot of money that has finally become available to the communities in the county. And it is available on a first-come, first-served basis. That is 80-20 money. Basically, the federal STP program would pay 80% of the eligible costs. The city would pay the other 20. So over the last 2 months, staff has been busy. We initiated a request for qualifications process for consultants to do the Phase 2 final design. We received 8 firms submitted their qualifications. Those were reviewed by staff, narrowed down to 3. Those firms, those were evaluated once again, and we picked the top firm out of the 8, which would be Civil Tech Engineering. We met with them, negotiated, asked them for cost, negotiated that, and the staff is very happy with their selection in Civil Tech Engineering to provide that Phase 2 design. So where we're at right now is based on the negotiated amount for the Phase 2. We sent that information to our planning liaison at the county. They've updated program documents, sent those to the state, and we expect to have those back in a matter of days, hopefully before the end of the week. At that point, we will submit our local agency agreement with the state and also our agreement with the consultant into IDOT for their review for FHW. It has to go through FHWA because it is federal funding. Once that all happens and gets sent in, nothing will happen for a good 4 months. There is a brief timeline in your packet. We expect to have agreements done, all the paperwork complete, and the firm ready to start design in May of this year. And the project design complete, approved by IDOT, approved by Metra, ICC, in April of 2019, with the project bid opening in June of 2019, construction starting soon thereafter and being completed by December of 2019. That is all we know right now. There's a lot of milestones, a lot of steps between here and there, so we've kept that schedule pretty broad, but that's our best estimate of when all that's going to happen. As far as cost, this information is also in your packet. The total project cost is $3,025,000. Included in that is the design funds for Civil Tech and the Phase 3 engineering. Basically, the cost of the actual construction is about $2.3 million. The city's portion of that would be $605,000, with the federal STP funds covering $2.4 million.
Well, thank you.
Any questions? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't show you the map. What am I doing? So up here and in front of you, you have the existing conditions for reference. North is to the top. Metro train station is here. Fifth Third Bank. The church is here. This is the lot that's being considered for the waterways, gas station, car wash here. The next one shows the proposed improvements from the Phase 1 design, and basically what you would see is the addition of a lane southbound on Waukegan that would be a dedicated turn lane for westbound Everett. Also here, currently, there is, the traffic comes through here in one lane and doesn't separate into the 3 lanes until after the railroad track. As you can see on here, that separation would take place way back here. So you would separate your right turn southbound, your eastbound and your northbound turn lanes back here. It would add a couple hundred feet in here of storage. Right now, if you're waiting to turn southbound, you have to be one of the lucky 3 cars that gets in right about here past the railroad crossing in order to get into that dedicated turn lane. This would move all that back to Telegraph, create a lot more storage for vehicles and get everybody into their respective lanes much sooner. There, no change over here, except for just they reconfigured how the striping was laid out, make it a little more, the flow a little better coming when you're coming north and turning onto here. So those are the major improvements on there that the consultant did the Phase 1 study thought would be of value to this intersection. It also picks up all of the key priority recommendations that the then city council wanted to see in a design. Be happy
Somehow
to answer any
those-
questions.
Those islands denoted in red seem to be a very defining.
That is a raised median, yes.
Yeah, and
That's
just kind of a
safety.
clearer, kind of a safer environment. It's just a little more clear for the first time
Yes.
participant in that intersection to understand. It's kind of odd how that all happens.
Well, I'm sure the horse is out of the barn on this, but I will continue to say that I think it's critical that we look at this right turn coming westbound on Everett Road, right turning onto Waukegan, because you get really jammed up here if you're wanting to go to Sunset Foods, because someone is going straight here and you want to make a right-hand turn, and it backs you up and it causes a real traffic problem, and I don't know what can be done about that at this point.
Well, as we're moving forward now, it is moving forward based on this Phase 1 design. If we were going to go ahead and change the scope and all that, we'd really have to end what we're doing here and go back to a Phase 1.
Yeah.
And what I was taught, I was not working on this in 2009 and 2010, but talking to the people that were involved, the biggest issue is the property here. There is no right-of-way available at the church. You would need to take about 15 feet going this way and then coming in here, which would put the cars coming right past the porch there on the church. I think that was the reason why the consultant did not recommend that, nor did council recommend that.
No, I see that as an issue. I guess the other thing would be that you configure this a little different, but we're not going to do that now, a little differently to cut out part of this proposed site to the south. You know, but that's a big deal. So, but I just would suggest we find some way to do that in the future on our list of to-dos.
Right. Thank you. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good update. Next, Chuck Myers, Superintendent of Parks and Forestry, for an update, information only, on the use of leaf blowers within the city and related noise ordinances. Kept my favorite topic till the end.
I hope to live up to your expectations and be very quick. I know you would like to move on. So I will skip some of the stuff I was going to talk about at the beginning. I think you are very aware of this issue in this community. We value well-manicured landscapes, yet landscape companies require the use of machinery that is very loud. And there are ways to work around that, but ultimately that's what it comes down to. And it's also typically a neighbor-to-neighbor type issue. Get going here. I won't read this or anything, but this is the ordinance that this is based on. It does state the hours. I'll get back to that in a few minutes. I won't go through this either. Just to remind you that this has come before City Council in the past over the years. Back in '91 was when they first established hours of operations for lawn equipment. Some of these other updates that went to City Council were more adjustments, not to the hours, but clarification on the ordinance. And then back in 2002, there was a draft ordinance that was brought before the City Council to ban blowers. That didn't get a consensus. It didn't pass. And then a couple years ago, there was a similar discussion as tonight with no action being taken. So it comes down to two big issues, as you know. There's the noise pollution issue. That's what started this time, talking about the nuisance of noise, but also the air pollution. And I would just remind you that the solutions aren't the same necessarily for both. There's no perfect blower that solves both of these. But as the mayor stated a few weeks ago, there have been a lot of advancements, and the industry has recognized that this is a big issue in communities, and they are adapting. We've met with some of those, and we've talked to them about that. So we do feel like the industry has changed a lot already, and they're going to continue to get better. So this is the part you really don't want to hear about, but this is the decibels. This is how you measure sound and all that kind of thing. So just to let you know that typically with decibel levels, it is a logarithmic scale. So it's not linear. So you can't think of it as 60 decibels to double that would be 120. It doesn't work that way. Actually, the rule of thumb is about 10 decibels higher is perceived as twice the sound level. So it goes up quickly. So that's one of the complicating factors with decibel levels. Most lawn equipment is typically between 80 and 20. This chart just shows some of the typical, like painfully loud is a jet aircraft versus in this room tonight, I would say it probably averaged around 60 decibels. So this is just to give you an idea where equipment is. This area, I circled the 60 to 70. There are communities that have adopted ordinances that regulate that blowers must be in that range. The older two-stroke engines that were on blowers were typically in the 80 to 90 decibel level and even over 100. So they were very loud, high pollution level. They were cheap, so they were very popular, but they were also very powerful. So that's why they're heavily used. Today, the improvements in technology have brought the gas-powered ones down. 70, 80 is typical, but you can get them now that are in the 60 to 70 decibel level also. When it comes to the electric or the battery-powered ones, clearly they have advantages environmentally. So for that air pollution, they don't emit anything. However, they don't really help. Well, they help some with the sound. They are quieter, but they're typically similar to these new level of gas-powered ones. So there's some pros and cons there. Using the decibel level can be difficult and somewhat misleading because there's other factors like how far away you are from these blowers, how many blowers, things like that. And keep in mind, if you have a lower powered blower, if it's not getting the job done as well, it's probably going to be longer and go on and irritate people. So the other thing to keep in mind is experts will tell you that it has also to do with the pitch of a blower. It's a particularly annoying pitch for a lot of people. These are some of the other communities in the area. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just some of the of our neighboring communities, just to give you an idea where they're at. You may hear a lot about bans around the country. I will tell you that most communities around here have not banned blowers, but some of the significant ones on here, Highland Park did ban blowers for certain times of the year, particularly the summer. Glencoe and Wilmette also. I don't have it on here, but Evanston is also in this group of communities that have banned them for the summer months. The other ones on here, it's just a sampling. So like I said, there are other communities that have no regulations. I list our hours. Lake Forest has hours set right now, Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 7:30 at night. And then on Saturday and Sunday, on Saturday it's 8 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. And then on Sunday and holidays, it's 10 to 7:30. Really quickly, a couple of things that are going on in the community. The college, a couple years ago, started an initiative. Their sustainability committee started this. They worked with Mariani Landscape on a contract. They negotiated it. They started requiring the blowers and some of the other machinery be battery powered, but also the mowers are battery powered as well. So this is kind of a big step in Lake Forest. They're not doing it on all of their property. They don't do the big ball fields, but the smaller areas, and they're very happy with the results. So I have talked to Mariani. There are potential. They are looking ahead. I can tell you that they are looking at the current climate, and they're seeing that a lot of people are interested in this, and they're looking at adjusting their services. It requires a big outlay of capital, though, so it's something they're taking seriously. In the Parks and Forestry, just quickly to mention that we have bought a few of the battery-powered ones just to try, kind of a pilot program. Our forestry guys are trying some currently, and we'll determine if it's a good fit for them. And I think everything looks good for that right now. So this is my last slide, but these are the possible actions. We are looking for direction. The possible actions are to adjust the allowable days and the hours of operation. The second one is to regulate the decibel levels allowed. Again, that 65 to 70 is what some other communities have done, and I've already told you why this can be difficult, but I'd also add that enforcement is extremely difficult on something like that. And then the next one is to prohibit the use of gas-powered leaf blowers for a portion of the year, similar to what I've just mentioned. And that would typically be banning them for the summer. And then when I say education and training initiatives, I'm talking about educating landscapers. We have a process that landscapers have to go through to get a license here in the city. We have over 400 companies that do that. We can distribute things to them, and we can encourage them. We can let them know that we're expecting things to be done better. Training of staff. I know that there are some issues with sometimes that the blowers are used on high speed, which is the loudest, and they don't need to be. If you're blowing off a driveway, it's possible, very possible, to just do it with low throttle. That makes a huge difference to neighbors. So that's something that we could try to encourage. And then the final thing I list is no action at all. As I said, there are a lot of improvements going on right now. You can wait to see how things come out with that. All right.
Chuck, thank you. Under trying circumstances, it's a good update. We look forward to the further research activities you have and some specific proposals, I think, with the background information.
I just really have one comment. I would give up all of those issues if they would just enforce the time on Sunday morning.
Okay.
Because 10 o'clock Sunday morning in my neighborhood is a joke. I mean, they want maximum daytime productivity. So in June and July, that's 13 to 15 hours a day that they're going. We get no break. All I want is Sunday morning.
Is that neighbors or is that services?
It's leaf blowers.
But it's
Who's
usually
using them?
neighbors.
Oh, the whole street, yeah.
But the resident, it's not
Yeah.
a
Because the
lawn
landscapers
service.
don't work on Sundays.
No, it's both. It's residents doing their own and services coming into the neighborhood.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Chuck,
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you.
So moved.
Second. Aye.
The next business is to adjourn into executive session pursuant to Section 120/2C1. We'll be discussing personnel. We have a motion to adjourn into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
It's a roll call vote.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Newman?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
7 yeas, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you, and there will be no further council business after the executive session.